Chapter 91. Shield of Death. Good news, Roland can catch them all in one fell swoop. Bad news, there are too many people, someone might escape. Looking at the people in the hall, Roland looked around and had a bold idea. After all, the Court of Silence is underground. Except for the passages, each room is relatively independent, and the hall at the moment only has 3 entrances and exits and a secret passage. Roland can set traps in these passages in advance, and while resisting them, he can also block their escape speed and buy time for himself to kill. He did it as soon as he said it. After having an idea, Roland immediately left the hall and went to these passages to set traps. Guillaume is dead, and he didn't send any message before his death. In the core position of the hall, the person in charge put his arms on the table, put his 10 fingers together, and said in a serious tone. Hearing the words of the person in charge, the 3 fourth ring spellcasters who knew the news were not surprised, and their faces were calm. Although the ring spellcasters behind them were a little agitated, they saw that they didn't move, and quickly returned to calm. However, the ring spellcasters under Guillaume were not so calm. After hearing the news, they became agitated instantly, without any sign of calming down. They even became more and more agitated, and some of them started to make noises. Impossible, how could he die without any news? He is a foraying spellcaster. Even those university schools will not attack him for no reason. Dream, I must be dreaming. They could not accept this reality. Guillaume's death meant that in the Court of Silence, their small group with Guillaume as the core could be declared disbanded. After losing their backers, they who had worked for Guillaume before might be liquidated by other small groups. Moreover, even if they were not liquidated and were accepted and absorbed by other small groups, all their efforts would disappear completely and everything would have to start all over again. Other foraying spellcasters would not recognize Guillaume's promise to them. Just as they were getting more and more agitated, the person in charge knocked on the table and said calmly, "Quiet." After the person in charge spoke, the restless ring spellcasters seemed to be poured with cold water, and the noise was instantly interrupted. Although they were unwilling, they did not dare to say much after the person in charge spoke. After all, even when Guillaume was still alive, no one dared to disobey the person in charge. After the hall regained its calm, a foraying spellcaster spoke. "I remember that Sean went out with Guillaume, right? Is he dead too?" The person in charge shook his head slightly and replied. "He is still alive, but there is interference and his position cannot be locked. Should we send someone to rescue him?" Another foraying spellcaster raised his eyebrows slightly and said. "Prepare to move the headquarters." The person in charge did not answer directly. While changing the topic, he also hinted at his answer. "If you don't save him, run away." Although Sean has a higher talent and is his carefully cultivated body, the cost of investment is not low, but Sean is not the only and irreplaceable thing. The person in charge will not confront an unknown enemy because of Sean. Guillaume is dead. If he wants to save Sean, doesn't he have to do it himself? What if he fails to win? Moreover, in the Tower of Truth, Guillaume may be killed by a spellcaster from a certain school. Even if he can beat this spellcaster, can he fight against an entire school? The most important point is that if a spellcaster like him who has not reported and forged his identity to sneak into the Tower of Truth is discovered, he may be targeted by the Council of Truth. What do you want to do if you don't report and hide in the village with a fake identity? Once the Council of Truth takes action, he will definitely die. So, after thinking it over, he chose to turn in. With the efficiency of the school, as long as he runs fast enough, he will not be caught. After hearing the idea of the transfer of the person in charge, the 3 foraying spellcasters thought about it for a while. Although they were a little hesitant, they finally nodded in agreement one by one when they thought about the attitude of the Tower of Truth towards their secret society. After the 4 of them reached an agreement, the decision to transfer the headquarters was confirmed. As for the ring spellcasters in the hall, their opinions were not important. They just came to listen to the decision and were responsible for execution. After confirming the decision to transfer, the person in charge also opened his mouth and prepared to say something. At this moment, a dagger emerged from behind him. The space-tearing power attached to it easily broke through his clothes, crossed his heart, and cut it in half. At the same time, the strong positive energy quickly flowed through the wound and injected into his body that was broken into 2 halves, and a fierce conflict broke out with the magic power in his body. The fragile organs in his body became a battlefield, weakened rapidly, and were even directly destroyed and crushed in the conflict. But even so, the person in charge did not die. His body was resisting death and maintaining his life. He struggled and tried to fight back against the attacker. But it was useless. Roland came out from the shadows behind him and grabbed his head. Then Roland crushed his head. Bang! Even at this point, the person who lost his head was still alive. The life in his body seemed to be locked and remained stable. Fuck, legendary spell Shield of Death. No, although the Crown of Domination does have this spell, but, can the fragments use legendary spells? Isn't it too outrageous? Seeing this scene, Roland also quickly confirmed what was happening to the person in charge. Under the effect of this spell, the person in charge's vitality will be completely locked, and during this period, he will not die no matter what. However, after the spell effect ends, the injuries on his body will rebound in one breath. If the injury is too serious, and he does not receive treatment and recover from the wound during the spell's duration, then he will die. Given that the person in charge is now dismembered, he will definitely die once the spell effect ends. However, legendary spells are not something Roland can break now. This means that Roland has no way to deal with the current person in charge. Roland did not hesitate, raised his legs and kicked, directly kicking his two halves of the body away, falling to both sides of the hall. Next, there is trouble. Roland originally planned to kill the Fivering spellcaster with a sneak attack first, and then crush the remaining spellcaster's Hedon. But the death shield ruined Roland's plan. Its existence meant that Roland not only had to fight with the Threaring and Foraying spellcasters in the hall, but also had to face a Fivering spellcaster who was locking his health. Roland was immediately under pressure. Chapter 92. After kicking the Fivering spellcaster away to buy some time, Roland immediately pounced on the other spellcasters around him. However, due to the interference of the death shield, Roland wasted a little more time. This little time also allowed the spellcasters present to react. After seeing the main person being chopped in half by Roland, a Foraying spellcaster took out a spell scroll without hesitation. Then, he tore it and used it. A powerful space wave swept past, and he disappeared directly on the spot. A high-ring space spell scroll? Where did he get it? Roland was a little helpless. He encountered more accidents than he imagined in this operation. In addition to the spellcaster who ran away decisively, the other two Foraying spellcasters also fought back. With the tacit understanding of the two Threaring spells rushed towards Roland. Roland frowned, turned into a shadow and stepped back a few steps to avoid the attack. In order to ensure the concealment of the raid, Roland did not have an elemental shield on him, so he could not resist it Hedon. Therefore, Roland was tacitly forced back by the two men and forced to stay away from them. In order to reduce their vigilance, Roland also pretended that he really had no means of defense and dodged according to their ideas. Bang! As a dark elemental magic ball exploded in front of Roland, he also moved another step and came to a pillar in the hall. At the moment Roland arrived, countless spells immediately burst out from all directions and bombarded Roland's position. While the two fourth-ring spellcasters were pulling with Roland, the remaining Threaring spellcasters did not just stand there and watch. They were silently accumulating power, and when Roland was forced into a corner, they immediately burst out. Under the bombardment of dozens of Threaring spells, the area where Roland was instantly filled with a lot of dust. Then, the two fourth-ring spellcasters also accumulated power and cast two fourth-ring spells at Roland's area. Bang! Under the bombardment of spells and the conflict between various elements, the area where Roland was located was in chaos. If Roland was just a Foraying knight, relying only on physical defense, he would be seriously injured if not dead. Just when a Foraying spellcaster relaxed a little, a cold light instantly broke through the chaotic elemental interference and broke through her elemental shield straightly. Before he could react, the light penetrated his head and finally nailed it to the floor, revealing the dagger that had shrunk due to high-speed movement. Without the death-rejecting shield and his body not yet sublimated, he died on the spot after a hole was opened in his head. As his body fell, almost everyone present turned their eyes to the area where Roland was. Under their gaze, the chaotic elemental area was torn apart and divided, revealing a safe passage. On the safe passage where the elements were separated, Roland's figure slowly walked out from inside, and in his right hand, an open magic book was floating on it. Without hesitation, after Roland showed his face, the spellcasters on the scene decisively launched another attack, bombarding Roland. A large number of spells once again covered the area where Roland was, hiding his figure once again. Just as they focused their attention on this, in front of the dagger embedded in the ground, a shadow flew out of the dagger, and then, the shadow of Roland's incarnation grabbed the dagger and rushed towards the last foraying spellcaster. There is no doubt that Roland, who came out of the chaotic element, was not the real body, but just an incarnation that Roland casually rubbed out as bait. His real body sneaked into the dagger and ran behind the enemies with it. Bang! With a metal collision sound, Roland emerged from the shadow, and the sharp dagger easily cut the staff blocking in front of him. The foraying spellcaster, who reacted in time and immediately turned around to block, did not care about the staff, and hurriedly stepped back a few steps. At the same time, he immediately prepared to cast a spell to force Roland back again. But how can a traditional spellcaster like him compare to Roland in terms of burst? Although Roland did not advance in both directions, he was mainly a spellcaster and a knight, but it was not difficult for him to be promoted to a low-level knight. Relying on the huge wealth he had obtained in the Kess Mountains before, he became a Threaring knight by spending money, and his burst power was much stronger than his technique blink. Roland burst out and rushed to his face in an instant. Under his horrified gaze, Roland waved the dagger in his hand and cut off his head with one knife, killing him directly. 3 foraying spellcasters, 1 escaped and 2 died. Before Roland could breathe a sigh of relief, the headless corpse in front of him suddenly emitted a magical wave. Fortunately, Roland reacted in time. The moment he sensed this wave, he kicked his feet and immediately moved away from the corpse. At the same time, he immediately built his own elemental shield. Corpse explosion? As soon as Roland moved away, the headless corpse swelled up instantly, and then a huge explosion sounded. Bang! The huge explosion instantly covered most of the hall. The Threaring spellcasters around suffered heavy casualties, and the 5 spellcasters who were relatively close were directly blown to death. Roland was also affected by the explosion and was directly blown away and hit the wall of the hall. Cough cough. Roland coughed twice and immediately took out a bottle of alchemy potion from the space bracelet and drank it. Although he built an elemental shield in time, the explosion still blasted away his temporary elemental shield, tore his clothes, and directly attacked his body. Although the elemental shield and the clothes on his body had resisted most of the impact and protected the more important parts of his body, Roland's body was still seriously damaged by the aftermath. He curled up, and his hands, which were exposed for defense, were already bloody. Fortunately, although Roland's body had not yet sublimated, it had evolved several times, so this minor injury did not have much impact. His arms absorbed nutrients from his body and recovered rapidly at a speed visible to the naked eye. The hot liquid flowed into his body and was quickly swallowed by his thirsty body, replenishing his physical consumption. After Roland threw the empty bottle and the dagger in his other hand back into the space bracelet, he jumped down from the wall and returned to the ground. He patted the smoke and dust on his body, and then Roland stretched out his right hand, and a magic book appeared in his hand. Corpse explosion is indeed a very useful spell, and he often used it in his previous life. Third ring spell corpse explosion. Roland detonated the last corpse of the 4th ring spellcaster on the field, as well as the corpses of all the 3rd ring spellcasters that had just been killed by the explosion. Bang! 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 With the continuous explosions, the 3rd ring spellcasters on the field were killed one by one, and then their corpses became new spell carriers, expanding and exploding, and then killing other spellcasters. Relying on this cycle, the explosions in the hall can be said to be continuous. Chapter 93. However, the corpse explosion technique still has its limitations. At least, the corpse explosion technique of the 3rd ring cannot directly use living people as casting materials, but must use dead bodies. Therefore, except for some people who were caught off guard at the beginning and were killed by the explosion, the casters who reacted immediately dispersed. Although the corpse explosion technique was not as threatening to them by dispersing, it also made it difficult for them to concentrate their forces to fight Roland. However, after Roland killed 2 4th ring casters, they had no intention of fighting Roland and all chose to escape. When Roland opened fire at full force, they were ruthlessly slaughtered by Roland. In the end, less than 10 casters escaped. After they escaped from the hall, Roland did not choose to chase them. Anyway, there were traps he set in the passage, which were enough to kill them. Moreover, even if there were still some who slipped through the net, Hela outside could deal with them. Roland looked into the depths of the hall. In the blood-stained hall, the 2 bodies of the master had disappeared. He did not choose to attack Roland, but chose to escape. While Roland was fighting in the hall, the master, who was cut in half, squirmed his body. After quietly gluing his body together again, he ignored the fighting in the hall and ran to the depths of the hall, where the master's room and laboratory were. Among them, the crown of domination that Roland wanted to seize was there. Roland walked calmly to the depths of the hall in the pool of blood, while taking out various alchemical potions from the space bracelet, replenishing the consumed physical strength and magic power, and at the same time, preparing for the next fight with the master. Roland did not encounter any obstacles and walked smoothly into the depths of the hall. He pushed open the master's room. A strong evil, crazy black breath immediately rushed to Roland, rushing towards Roland frantically, trying to erode him. Roland frowned slightly, took a step back, and stretched out his right index finger. Third ring spell Elemental Torrent. The elemental torrent composed of positive energy burst out from his index finger, neutralizing the evil and crazy power. After being neutralized, the black aura also became much lighter, and Roland was able to see the situation in the room clearly. In the room, a figure was kneeling in front of a table. The figure's body was a little deformed, his upper body was a little crooked, and the head on his neck was not an ordinary head, but a triangular head made of flesh and blood. He was most likely the person in charge of the body that had been glued back together. On the table in front of him, under various exquisite and gorgeous decorations, a small statue was solemnly placed on it. On the head of the statue, a crown with a main body of black crystal was worn on its head. A large amount of black aura poured out of the statue and continued to flow into the body of the person in charge. The black aura in the room was just overflowing. Roland did not hesitate and injected more and thicker positive energy into the room. The black aura in the entire room was quickly neutralized and eliminated. At the same time, the positive energy also hit the black aura connecting the statue and the person in charge, forcibly destroying their connection. After destroying the connection, Roland immediately attacked the strange statue. Fourth ring spell Holy Judgment. Unlike the gentle positive energy in the elemental torrent, the positive energy in the Holy Judgment is full of aggression and destructiveness. Just as the golden light beam hit the statue, the crown on the statue flashed slightly, and a light black shield covered the surroundings, protecting the statue and the person in charge. Like a drop of water falling into the ocean, the aggressive golden light beam did not make any movement when it touched the light black shield, and directly melted into the black shield. 7-ring Gluttony Shield. After recognizing the spell in front of him, Roland frowned and stopped the ineffective spell. Could this crown of domination be the complete form? Roland looked at the crown of domination that was exerting its power and was a little surprised. However, if it was a complete form, the effect would not be so weak, and Roland should have been killed with a finger of death. This crown of domination should be just a fragment, and if it was just a fragment, it should not have such a strong initiative. No, it is definitely problematic. With Roland's rich experience, he quickly realized that there was something wrong with the crown of domination in front of him, so he also wanted to retreat. Although he came to hunt the Court of Silence in order to grab the crown of domination, it was not worth taking risks for a problematic crown of domination. Thinking of this, Roland remembered the breath of the crown of domination, silently stepped back a few steps, and prepared to run away. He planned to go back to the Massimo school, report the Court of Silence, and then take the casters of the Massimo school to kill the person in charge. As for the crown of domination, he did not hold any hope, and it would definitely become the spoils of the Massimo school. And just as Roland quietly moved and prepared to leave here, he used the space spell to teleport away directly. He hoped to escape without alerting the crown of domination. At this moment, the person in charge, who had been kneeling on the ground, suddenly stood up. Standing in front of the statue, he stretched out his hand. The crown on the statue instantly grew larger and fell into his hand. The person in charge quickly put the crown on his head. Afterwards, a powerful aura instantly burst out from the person in charge, and his strength instantly increased by 2 levels, reaching the level of the 7th level. At the same time, his deformed body also changed rapidly. A strong aura of the dead exploded in his body, and his body quickly reconstructed and restored to the appearance of a normal person, and completed the undead transformation at an astonishing speed. Finally, a powerful soul fire ignited in his head. Looking at a face that was completely different from the one in charge, Roland felt a little numb. For the first time, he felt that his soul was sublimated, and it was not a good thing to remember all the memories of his previous life. Isn't this face the Lich King who only appeared in the memory CG and was killed by Littorio in the previous life? Damn, how can I, a foraying spellcaster, fight against this kind of Lich who is only one step away from being a legend? Crazy. I fight the Lich King, is it true? Roland didn't hesitate at all, and immediately cast a space spell and tried to run away. But, it was useless. The person in charge with the face of the Lich King cast a spell with his bare hands, and a space anchor fell, locking the surrounding space, directly cutting off Roland's possibility of escape. Roland stopped the spell, looked at the Lich King in front of him, and said cautiously, "Sir, congratulations on your new body. I have no grudge against you, and I don't know you. Can you let me go?" Hearing Roland's words, the Lich King finally moved. He looked at Roland, opened his mouth, and spoke fluently. "You know me." His tone was full of affirmation. Chapter 94. Hearing the words of the Lich King, Roland also sighed. In recent years, life has been too smooth, and Roland has relaxed a lot, especially after being promoted to the 4th ring. Roland has no intention of covering up. In addition, the appearance of the Lich King was a bit sudden, and Roland did not manage his expression well for a while, revealing that he knew the Wizard King. If it were a few years ago, even if Roland recognized the Lich King, he would definitely manage his expression well and pretend that he didn't know him at all. Although Roland's expression changed for only a short moment when he saw him and regained his composure, this momentary change could not be hidden from the Wizard King. Even though he is now only a 7th ring spellcaster, Roland invested part of his mental power into the space bracelet, ready to take action, and at the same time, he also began the final attempt. He said cautiously to the Lich King in front of him, "Sir, I am only fortunate to have seen your face in ancient books." The Lich King stared at Roland with his emotionless undead eyes, and behind his eyes, the cold soul fire flickered slightly. 5th ring spell Dead Flame. As the tyrant who turned all citizens into undead in the Sinner Kingdoms, the Lich King did not intend to listen to Roland's explanation, but to get the information himself. Living people can lie, and the words spoken from the mouths of living people may be lies, but the dead will not. As a Lich, he has a way to make Roland's corpse speak. A 4th ring spellcaster, just kill him at will. After he made a move, Roland also chose to fight back helplessly. The moment he made a move, Roland took out the High Priest's staff from the space bracelet and decisively mobilized the blessing inside the staff. 6th ring spell Dead Shield. 7th ring spell Finger of Death. After using the Dead Shield to resist the attack of the Lich King, Roland also broke out immediately, using the blessing as a boost, and quickly constructed a powerful single-target killing spell. Among all the high-level spells Roland has mastered, the Finger of Death is the best in single-target attack spells. It not only has strong attack power, but also has an instant death effect. Roland often used it to kill elite monsters in his previous life, and it was quite useful. Why does Roland, a 4th level spellcaster, know high-level spells? The staff in his hand did not record any spells. These 2 spells were completely constructed by him personally. The staff only provided most of the consumption of the spells. Although the Lich King was a little surprised by this, he immediately counterattacked. The crown of domination on his head flashed slightly, and the legendary spell Death Shield covered him. Under the effect of the Death Shield, the Lich King easily resisted Roland's counterattack. Bad luck. Looking at the Lich King's appearance, Roland could only curse inwardly. He didn't think there was anything wrong with what the Lich King did. After all, equipment is used. If it is not used, why make equipment? However, through the Lich King's actions, with Roland's rich combat experience, he also noticed something awkward and wrong about the Lich King. Although the Lich King's current aura seemed to be that of a 7th ring spellcaster, he would not directly use the Death Shield just because of Roland's counterattack. Roland did not think that the crown of domination on his head could cast a few more legendary spells. Is it necessary to waste a legendary spell on a 4th ring spellcaster like him? While recalling all the relevant memories about the Lich, Roland also relied on the blessing to continuously cast spells across levels to fight against the Lich King. At the same time, during the confrontation, Roland also divided some of his attention and silently observed the Lich King. Lich is a forbidden reincarnation ritual that achieves immortality through necromancy. The caster will go through several processes and gradually abandon his original racial identity. His body will evolve further towards undeadness, and his soul will be sealed in the life box to undergo a thorough undeadization. Finally, after everything on the body has been deeply undead, the caster will go through the final reincarnation ceremony and directly reincarnate into a Lich, becoming a new, real undead creature. Although for most people in this world, what they hear most is the undead. Many people have never heard of the undead. However, the undead do exist. Their origin comes from the dark elemental world, and they are the general term for the native intelligent life forms of the dark elemental world. Although the population is sparse, almost all of them are immortal, that is, they are used to living in the dark elemental world and rarely have any communication with the material world. Therefore, the material world has little understanding of the undead. However, when some new liches in the future write books to explain the existence of the undead, and when Hela brings more than a dozen undeads under her command to the material world, the existence of the undead will gradually spread. In fact, the death bird is also a reserve of the undead. As long as it is cultivated steadily, the death bird will also become an immortal undead. Roland frowned, took a step back, and once again drew the blessing from the staff, constructed a 7-ring spell, and neutralized the attack of the Lich King. He kept flipping through his memories, and always felt that he seemed to have forgotten something important. Lich. Roland recalled the Lich players he met in professional competitions, and thought over and over again. The 9-ring Lich in the 3rd event, the Ice Lich and Shadow Lich in the 4th season, and various single-element specialized Liches, and the immortal legendary Lich in the 5th season. No, these Liches are all created by players' own thinking and experimentation. If it is the Lich King. Roland turned his memory to the first few years of the game's launch. Yes, there were many problems with the traditional Liches in the early stage. Although most of them were minor problems, there was a fatal weakness, which made the traditional Liches particularly unpopular with players. Since the Lich reincarnation ceremony at the beginning had not yet undergone technological iteration and upgrade, the traditional Lich reincarnation ceremony was completed in the material world. Therefore, the traditional Lich is a dead spirit born in the material world. And, for the material world, the dead spirit does not belong to the native race of the material world. Of course, the dark elemental world belongs to the subsidiary subplane of the material world, and the dead spirits of the dark elemental world can still move in the material world. But, the Lich born in the material world is not okay. He is an alien that does not belong to the material world or the dark elemental world. To put it simply, if the material world and the dark elemental world are regarded as two countries, then, as the special citizens of the dark elemental world, only the dark elemental world can register the dead spirit. Since no undead spirits have ever been born in the material world, there is no practice of registering undead spirits, and only the dark elemental world's household registration is used as the standard. Therefore, the Lich reincarnated in the material world is a stowaway without any household registration. Chapter 95. However, although he is a stowaway, as long as he is not discovered, there will be no big problem. Moreover, in the future, this primitive Lich reincarnation ceremony has been continuously improved and developed, and gradually perfected. Whether it is reincarnating in the dark elemental world to get a household registration, reincarnating in the material world to cheat for a household registration, or becoming a legend, as a high-quality talent, taking the initiative to register a household registration in the material world. Basically, spellcasters who can reincarnate as Liches have means to solve this problem. However, the Lich King in front of him, as the first Lich in the world, is probably not aware of this problem. Although he was only one step away from becoming a legend 1,000 years ago, he is not a legend after all. Maybe he is a Lich without a household registration. Thinking of this, Roland felt it necessary to give it a try. He took a step back, and a 6-ring spell was thrown out by him casually to defend against the attack of the Lich King. Using the blessing inside the High Priest's staff as energy, Roland generously cast a large number of spells he knew, and fought back and forth with the Lich King. Although he had the crown of domination to assist him, the Lich King's strength was not particularly exaggerated. He was just at the level of an ordinary 7th-ring spellcaster, with a little more magic power and a little faster casting speed. Fortunately, Roland also had the assistance of the blessing, and with the various spell-casting skills he had learned in his previous life, he could still deal with it simply. Unfortunately, since Roland's own strength was only at the 4th ring, even with the blessing, he could only use some simple high-ring spells at most. Although Roland could also cast slightly more complex high-ring spells or legendary spells, his body could not bear it. Although the consumption of spell casting was completely covered by the blessing, and the pressure of spell casting on the body and soul was also mostly shared by the blessing, Roland still had to actively build the spell model after all, and this part of the pressure needed to be resisted by Roland himself. Even if it was a simple high-ring spell, continuous casting put a lot of pressure on Roland. Therefore, Roland could easily deal with the Lich King at the beginning, but as time went on, Roland gradually fell into a disadvantage. After defending against the Lich King's attack again, Roland seized the break in the attack and clenched the high priest's staff. The grimoire immediately appeared in his other hand. Then, the grimoire quickly opened and quickly turned to the page recording a high evil spell. 7th ring spell Plain Exile. Since the blessing in the high priest's staff is the blessing of the dark elemental world, it is very effective for casting dark elements or necromancy spells, but it is not so suitable for casting space spells. In addition, space spells are basically more complex spells, so the casting time of this 7th ring spell is relatively long. The Lich King naturally seized this opportunity and threw out a 7th ring necromancy spell, which directly shattered Roland's shield. After losing the protection of the shield, Roland's fragile body was also exposed to the Lich King. Without hesitation, dozens of light balls constructed by dark elements bombarded Roland. Any of these light balls, if they touch Roland, will kill him immediately. However, the shield has given him enough time to delay. As a powerful spatial fluctuation descended on the Lich King, his face changed drastically. Under this force, his soul fire began to tremble constantly, and a powerful and irresistible force was constantly expelling his soul from this body. In this case, the Lich King naturally concentrated his energy to fight against this force, and he naturally lost control of the light ball. Without the control of the caster, Roland naturally defended the attack easily. Later, when the Lich King fought against the space exile, Roland also took advantage of the victory and decisively cast a spell to destroy the space anchor that had also lost control. After losing the blockade and stabilization of the space by the space anchor, the effect of space exile was once again improved. Roland did not continue to attack, but prepared the teleportation spell in advance. Once the space exile had no effect, Roland immediately ran away. The Lich was still too difficult to deal with. His resistance to dark elements was too high, and most of the spells Roland could cast with the High Priest's staff were dark elements or necromancy spells, so the attack effect was too poor. If he wasn't a Lich, Roland would have to cast spells to defend himself continuously, and he wouldn't have had extra time to cast spells to run away, otherwise he would have teleported away long ago. After spending dozens of seconds preparing a high-ring space teleport to ensure that he could teleport away even if the Lich King placed a space anchor, Roland turned his eyes to the Lich King in front of him. Looking at the Lich King who was still fighting against the exile, Roland did not show any mercy. Since he now had plenty of time, Roland did not simply and crudely use the blessing as energy directly. Instead, he chose to use the blessing to temporarily improve his mental power. After reaching the level of the 6th ring, Roland stopped the improvement. Then, relying on the improved mental power, Roland began to cast spells. 6th ring spell Purification. 6th ring spell Holy Light. Roland cast 2 spells that were mainly positive energy and special attacks on the undead. As the 2 spells covered the Lich King's body, his highly undead body began to be purified, and the degree of undeadness decreased. Although the death rejection shield locked his vitality, it did not mean he was invincible, and most spells were still effective. After the degree of undeadness decreased, this body became increasingly unsuitable to the Lich King, and even began to reject him. After all, this is the body of the Master, not the body of the Lich King, and it naturally rejects the Lich King as an outsider. If the Lich King had not forcibly turned the Master's body into a highly undead one, this body would have long rejected the Lich King. If the Lich King was given enough time, he would definitely be able to turn the Master's body into his own. Although the body was rejecting the Lich King, he still did not give up, and while tightly controlling the head of the body, he resisted the exile. In response, Roland chose to increase his strength, and various positive energy spells continued to cover his body, constantly purifying and weakening the Lich King. Roland's spatial exile means that the Lich King's identity without a household registration has been discovered. What he has to fight against is not a 7-ring spell, but the rejection of him by the entire material world. Even if this rejection is just an instinctive reaction of the world, not the full rejection of the entire material world, but unless the Lich King is excluded or hides his identity again, this rejection will not stop. The constant rejection from the material world, coupled with Roland's constant purification, consumed the Lich King in the end. Chapter 96. Under the spontaneous rejection of the material world and Roland's continuous purification, the Lich King was finally forced to leave the body of the Master. However, he was not directly rejected from the material world as Roland expected, but merged into the Crown of Domination. At the same time, the Crown of Domination also took back the Shield of Death Rejection, concentrating its strength to help the Lich King fight against the rejection of the material world. After losing the blood-locking effect of the Shield of Death Rejection, the body of the Master collapsed instantly. The body of the master had been seriously damaged for a long time, and in addition, he had undergone a period of undeadization and forced purification in a short period of time. The reason why this fragile body could still hold on was originally relying on the power of the Shield of Death Rejection. However, after the Shield of Death Rejection was withdrawn, he completely collapsed, and his body, which was still a bit human, instantly collapsed into a pool of flesh and blood. After losing the shell, the crown of domination still floated in the air. On top of the crown of domination, a little man who looked almost exactly like the Lich King held an illusory staff in his hand. Although Roland caught the Lich's weakness and expelled the body of the person in charge, he did not get angry. Instead, he looked at Roland calmly, fighting against the rejection of the material world while waving his staff. Huge space fluctuations broke out in the open space between the Lich King and Roland, and countless space cracks appeared in the air. Then, like a broken mirror, the space was torn out, and a piece of black and red land appeared in front of them. Above these lands, dense undead were wandering in disorder. With the help of the Crown of Domination, the Lich King tore open the world barrier and opened the channel between the material world and the dark elemental world. When the channel was opened, the fluctuations in space also attracted their attention, so they turned their heads and looked over here. As the only living being present, Roland naturally all looked at him. Although the undead had no interest in Roland, they ignored him after taking a look and continued to walk aimlessly. However, the Lich King would not just let the undead go after opening the passage with great effort. He continued to squeeze the Crown of Domination, directly forcibly controlling the undead near the passage, and ordered them to attack Roland to buy time for him. However, his attempt was not very effective. Although the Lich King, as the first Lich King in this world, should theoretically be the one who controls the most undead in the material world, and has extremely rich experience in manipulation. However, compared with Roland, the Lich King is still a little worse. The Lich King has to summon or transform the undead himself to control them, and the undead he has controlled in his lifetime is at most 10 or 20 million. And what about Roland? When he was a professional in his previous life, Roland might have to control tens of millions or even more than 100 million undead in a strategic battle. Although because of the large number of undead, professional competitions do not allow the use of smart casting and smart assistance, Roland can only perform rough manipulation in the Legion mode, and cannot micromanage like the Lich King. However, Roland played many games and controlled many undead, so practice makes perfect. Moreover, Roland often had to fight with other liches or necromancers for control of the undead, and had rich experience in fighting for control. As the first lich in this world, the Lich King had never fought with other liches, or even legendary necromancers, for control of the undead. Therefore, Roland drew the blessing from the High Priest's staff and fought with the Lich King for control of the undead. Although Roland was sure that he could grab all the control, in order to consume the power of the Lich King and speed up his exile from the material world, Roland still consciously fought back and forth with the Lich King to give him false hope. Because the Lich King had to fight against the rejection of the material world while fighting with Roland for control of the undead, he had no extra energy to pay attention to Roland. While pretending to fight with the Lich King for control of the undead, Roland also quietly sent a few messages to Hela outside with the Book of Wisdom. Then, in less than a minute, Roland saw from the corner of his eye that some extraordinary materials suddenly appeared silently around the Lich King. After Roland and the Lich King had been fighting for a few more minutes, the Lich King finally gave up the fight for control of the undead after realizing that he would definitely fail if he continued to fight like this. When he gave up, the materials around him were almost ready. Although there were still some auxiliary materials missing, the main materials were already in place, and the missing auxiliary materials could be completely replaced by blessings. There was no time left. Once the Lich King's attention was withdrawn from the undead, he might find the ritual materials around him at any time. Therefore, in order to avoid accidents, Roland decisively launched the ritual. At the moment the ritual was launched, a terrifying consciousness instantly descended on the black and red land connected to the dark elemental world, and the space channel was instantly reinforced, and then it projected its consciousness here. After sensing this terrifying consciousness, the Lich King also came back to his senses. He was not directly suppressed by this terrifying consciousness like the cultists in the north. On the contrary, he still retained his consciousness. He put down his staff and looked around at the ritual materials around him. He realized that he had lost in this game with Roland. The little man floating in the crown of domination sighed. He looked at Roland calmly and said the second sentence he said to Roland, which was also likely to be the last sentence. "Youngster, you are very good. You won, but I haven't lost yet." After saying that, he drew out the power of the crown of domination at all costs, and a powerful spell burst out from him. Legendary spell Death Sigh. A grey gas flew out from the crown of domination, passed through the ceremony directly, and rushed towards Roland. Gah! Looking at this legendary spell, Roland was completely stunned. "No, aren't you a ninering lich? How can you have two legendary spells? Forget about the Shield of Death Rejection, how can you even know Death Sigh? This is the spell with the highest single target lethality of the undead. Even a legendary knight would be seriously injured if he resisted it Hedon, not to mention Roland's small body. Not to mention being touched, even a little aftermath can easily kill Roland." Facing the heavy pressure brought by the breath of death, Roland gritted his teeth, tried his best, and continuously drew the blessing of the High Priest's staff, forcibly activating the teleportation spell he had prepared. Although as a legendary spell, the enormous power of Breath of Death will affect the stability of the teleportation spell, but the deviation in teleportation will at most cause time turbulence. In any case, it is better than being killed by the Death Sigh. Chapter 97. At the moment when Roland teleported, the Grey Crow also emerged from the void, grabbed Roland's robe, and was swept into the space turbulence with him. After the host of the ceremony left, the subplane consciousness of the dark elemental world that descended here was also a little hesitant. However, it did not hesitate for long, and soon, it received a request for sacrifice from another host. He looked at the little man on the crown of domination, and then he stretched out his power and tried to bring the soul of the Lich King. Although the Lich King was a little disappointed that Roland successfully teleported away, he did not try to resist the subplane consciousness, and was easily pulled out of the crown of domination. According to Roland's sacrifice routine, the subplane consciousness shattered the soul of the Lich King, transformed it into soul nutrients, and randomly sprinkled it in the dark elemental world. Then, according to the rule of equivalent exchange, the subplane consciousness packed the blessings brought by the sacrifice of the Lich King and placed it directly in the original place. It released the connection channel and left the material world. After it left, Hela, covered in fresh blood, also rushed in. The blood on the long sword in her right hand was dripping on the ground. Hela looked at the mess in front of her, bit her lips, and the bloody taste flowed into her mouth. She did not cry, but clenched the long sword in her hand and walked in front of the blessing. Hela reached out and put all the blessings into the space bracelet first, and then she looked at the crown of domination that fell on the ground. Under the oppression of the Lich King, the crown of domination has lost its previous brightness and became dim. Hela was a little hesitant, she didn't know whether the Lich King was dead or not. Although after Roland teleported away, as the second host of the remote control of the Grey Crow to prepare the ceremony, Hela sacrificed the Lich King. However, through the shared vision of the Grey Crow, Hela only saw the Lich King launching an attack on Roland that seemed to destroy everything. In the end, Hela didn't know how the sacrifice ceremony worked. After hesitating for a while, Hela chose to act cautiously. According to the knowledge Roland taught her, Hela threw out various extraordinary materials from a distance, and through the remote activation ceremony, she teleported the crown of domination to the secret cave where she was kidnapped before. Then, Hela left here. She had to think about how to save Roland from the space turbulence. Although Hela didn't know much about space spells, she still knew some basic things. In order to return to the material world from the space turbulence, Roland needed an accurate anchor point from the material world. In fact, this was also the reason why she let the Grey Crow rush up and follow Roland into the space turbulence at the end. As her natal magic pet, the Grey Crow is undoubtedly the best anchor point to lock Hela. However, one Grey Crow may not be enough, so Hela prepared some preparations to amplify her connection with the Grey Crow in the material world, and then arranged some space nodes to assist Roland in locking her position. While Hela was working hard to save Roland in the material world, Roland did not give up saving himself. In the space turbulence, in order to save energy, Roland chose to flow along the chaotic space turbulence. At the same time, he also scanned the chaotic environment in the space turbulence, looking for the possibility of leaving. Although Roland found some weak anchor points, he did not dare to try it easily. Who knows what these anchor points represent? It would be bad if he was teleported to some strange place. If there was no Hela, Roland would not mind being alone. Anyway, he had no sense of belonging to Siner, and changing places would make no difference to him. However, Hela is still a teenager now. Even if she is already a Threaring spellcaster, Roland is still a little worried about her. While scanning the space turbulence, Roland also said to the Grey Crow on his shoulder. Grey Crow, move, use your super wisdom, and find Hela's location. In response to Roland's words, the Grey Crow tilted his head, his eyes full of innocence. Don't play dumb, find it quickly. Roland met the Grey Crow's eyes and said speechlessly. Seeing Roland's attitude, the Grey Crow had to put away its attempt to deceive, revealing a helpless look, it flapped its wings and flew up. In the past few years following Hela, the Grey Crow also knew Roland's ability. Based on its experience over the years, basically nothing can be difficult for Roland, and the same is true for the space-time turbulence. Roland was not in a hurry at all, so it was naturally not in a hurry either. Originally, it wanted to play it badly and get by, but the space turbulence outside was scary. It had no choice but to activate its own virtualization ability, passed through the shield, flew in the space turbulence, and found Hela's anchor point according to its contract with Hela. After the Grey Crow left, Roland did not continue to scan and search. The task of finding a needle in a haystack was given to the Grey Crow, and Roland wanted to try other methods. For example, luck. Roland took out a dice and prepared to use the prophecy to see if his process of returning to the material world would be smooth. Prophecy spell luck perception. Roland threw the dice into his palm. The dice spun a few times in Roland's palm, and finally stopped at 6. 6, this number is a bit subtle. Roland used a 10-sided dice. Although 6 represents good luck, it is only a little bit better and does not mean that everything will go smoothly. Although according to his experience in using language spells to improve the success rate of weapon enhancement in his previous life, the judgment of luck perception is relatively vague. Good luck does not mean that everything will go smoothly, and bad luck does not mean that it will definitely fail. But, good luck is always better than bad luck. Moreover, this is the real world, maybe the prophecy spell will be very strong. In the game world of the previous life, due to the limited expressiveness of the game, the effect of the prophecy spell is not particularly magical. It can only interfere with various probabilities within the game. The spell that predicts the future can only be used to understand the version information in advance, or to open the map in the Guild War and peek at the action route of the hostile player. Roland hesitated for a while and chose to interfere. At the cost of overdrawing future luck, Roland reversed the luck on the dice. He did not overdraw too much. After raising the number of the dice to 7, Roland gave up interfering. Although Roland is quite proficient in prophecy spells, he can wait and pay back the overdrawn luck slowly, but he is still cautious and dare not just mindlessly max it out like he did in his previous life. It was okay in his previous life, and it didn't matter if he overdrawn it. As long as he could suppress the backlash until the end of the game and wait for the official account to be recovered, the price Roland had to pay would be equal to nothing. And new accounts will naturally be used for new games. But, the past was the past, and the present is now. Roland dare not play like this now. He actually got the second round of recommendations for the new book, great. Chapter 98. After Roland's future fortune was improved by his interference, Roland also put away the dice and continued to scan the surrounding space turbulence while his fortune was still there. After an unknown amount of time, before Roland could find the anchor point, the Grey Crow returned to Roland again. It flapped its wings and landed on Roland's shoulder. Then, it called twice and stretched out its wings to point in a direction. Found it? Roland asked casually as he followed the direction it pointed and walked against the space turbulence. Hearing Roland's question, the Grey Crow nodded in affirmation. Under the guidance of the Grey Crow, Roland avoided the stronger space turbulence and continued to move forward. While moving forward, Roland also used the contract between the Grey Crow and Hela as a medium to search for Hela's anchor point in the material world. In the space turbulence, there is no clear concept of time and space. Therefore, after Roland had walked for an unknown amount of time, he finally captured Hela's anchor point in the space-time turbulence. Looking at the anchor point in front of him, which was somewhat dim under the impact of the space-time turbulence, Roland extended his mental power and touched it. After locking this anchor point, Roland also looked around the space turbulence. Although the space turbulence is dangerous, there are many benefits that can be mined from it. Space-related extraordinary materials such as space stones can also be mined here. Moreover, there are some special extraordinary creatures living in the space-time turbulence. Whether they are hunted or kept in captivity, they are very valuable. Unfortunately, Roland's strength is not good now, and he has not prepared auxiliary equipment in advance, so he can't go deep into the space turbulence. After a hard time, he didn't get any benefits. Although he felt a little sorry, Roland still chose to leave without any nostalgia. Using Hela's anchor point as the coordinate, Roland used space teleportation. In the material world, inside a dark cave, Hela was picking out various extraordinary materials from the space bracelet, flipping through books, and copying the rituals to strengthen and expand her connection with the Grey Crow. Just as Hela completed the 23rd strengthening ritual, a powerful space fluctuation broke out in the center of the cave. After sensing this space fluctuation, Hela did not relax, but retreated dozens of steps, looking vigilantly at the place where the space fluctuation broke out. However, as the space was torn apart and she regained contact with the Grey Crow, Hela also breathed a sigh of relief and ran over in small steps. As she trotted, a familiar figure appeared in the center, and on his shoulder, the Grey Crow was lying weakly. Hela finally stopped half a meter away from Roland and looked at him. Roland turned his head to look at her and said with a smile, "You have worked hard during this period." Hearing Roland's words, Hela, who could have restrained her emotions and pretended to be strong, could not hold it any more. She opened her mouth slightly, and there were many things she wanted to say in her heart, but she didn't know how to say it. A strange electric feeling surged into her heart, and then her eyes turned slightly red, and tears overflowed uncontrollably. Hela took a few steps forward, hugged Roland, buried her head in Roland's arms, and sobbed softly. After all, she is just a child. Roland gently touched Hela's head and said gently, "If you feel uncomfortable, just cry, don't suppress yourself." Hearing Roland's words, Hela couldn't suppress herself at all, hugged Roland and cried. Roland had no experience in comforting people, so he had to hold her and let her cry out. On the side, the Grey Crow standing on Roland's shoulder looked at Hela with disgust. Such a troublesome woman. It flapped its wings and planned to fly away. At this time, Hela, who was crying while holding Roland, reached out and hid its wings. The Grey Crow and Hela have a contract, and its heart cannot be hidden from Hela. Therefore, Hela chose to punch it. After being hit unexpectedly, the Grey Crow fell directly from midair. It quickly flapped its wings and flew up again before falling to the ground. In order to avoid being hit by Hela again, it flew away. After crying for a while, Hela gradually calmed down. Looking at Hela sleeping in his arms, Roland was also a little worried and took the initiative to sense her situation. Fortunately, Hela was just too tired. Roland glanced around, the various rituals that Hela tried, the extraordinary materials piled up in a mess, and the books thrown everywhere. It seems that Hela has not rested since he was involved in the space turbulence, so it is not surprising that she suddenly relaxed and fell asleep. Roland picked up Hela, glanced around, found an open space, and took out the wooden bed from the wooden house of the space bracelet. He gently put Hela on the bed and covered her with a quilt. Then, Roland turned around, looked at the messy cave, and began to clean up. Now that Roland is back, there is no need to continue to maintain these rituals. If they are dismantled early, some resources can be deducted from them. After spending more than 10 minutes, Roland dismantled all the rituals, sorted out and recycled the supernatural materials that could still be used, and sorted and recycled all the supernatural materials and books piled on the ground. After dealing with the messy cave, Roland also looked deep into the cave. In the innermost part, the lightless and dim crown of domination was stuck in the soil. Roland walked over, picked it up, and patted the dirt off it. Then, he began to check. The crown of domination in front of him was not a complete one. Although it looked complete, only about 1/3 of it was real. The remaining 2/3 were glued together with some extraordinary materials and were not genuine. Although 1/3 of a legendary equipment fragment was already very good, if a high-level spellcaster knew about it, even if they were not necromancers, they might come to grab it. However, there was a small problem with the crown of domination in front of him. It was drained by the Lich King. The control and undeadization of the body of the person in charge, the battle with Roland, and the consumption of 3 legendary spells were basically provided by the crown of domination. Moreover, the crown of domination was also responsible for protecting and nurturing the soul of the Lich King, and its consumption could be said to be quite high. In addition, it had hardly received any maintenance over the years, and its energy was absorbed slowly by itself. The most important point was that it was not a complete body and its functions were not perfect. Therefore, under the operation of the Lich King, this fragment was directly sucked dry. If it wasn't a legendary equipment, with legendary characteristics, it would have been broken into countless pieces long ago, not to mention that it still looks like a crown. Before the crown of domination is restored, it is basically useless. Looking at the crown of domination that is stubbornly absorbing the scattered dark elements around it and trying to restore itself, Roland took the initiative to inject his own magic power. He put his mark on the ownerless crown of domination to ensure control over it. Then, Roland shrunk the crown of domination and wore it on his right finger as a special ring. Although the crown of domination, as a crown equipment, should be worn on the head, it would be too noticeable for Roland, a spellcaster, to wear it as a crown, and he didn't want to cause any unnecessary trouble. Chapter 99. In the dim cave, a large number of undead creatures were distributed in an orderly manner on the periphery of the cave. In the center of the cave, there was a wooden bed that was out of tune with the surrounding environment. On the wooden bed, a beautiful girl was frowning and sleeping. At the head of the girl's bed, an unknown grey crow was standing on the head of the bed, turning its head and looking around. In addition, beside the bed, a white-haired boy was squatting next to a corpse, holding a knife, cutting back and forth, as if dismembering the corpse, and picking out some bright red organs from the corpse. In this environment, the red eyes looked like a demon. If someone who didn't know came in, they might think this was the lair of some evil organization. At this moment, the girl on the wooden bed moved her eyelids slightly. The white-haired boy noticed the girl's reaction, and his hands moved a little faster. He quickly stuffed the new organ next to him into the corpse in front of him and sewed the surface skin back together. Then, he stood up, and the water elements around him gathered and formed some flowing water on his hands, cleaning the stains and blood. He turned around and walked to the bed. Awake. Looking at Hela, who closed her eyes and pretended to be asleep on the bed, Roland raised his eyebrows slightly and said. After hearing Roland's words, Hela quietly opened her eyes and secretly peeked at Roland. Roland took out a bottle of alchemy potion from the space bracelet, met her vision, and said. Get up. After meeting Roland's vision, Hela opened her eyes honestly, took the alchemy potion handed over by Roland obediently, opened it and drank it without asking anything. A warm force poured into her body, nourishing her body that was somewhat lacking in nutrition. After drinking the alchemy potion prepared by Roland for her, Hela also regained her spirit. Hela climbed up from the bed, recalled what she had done when she was asleep, and took a sneak peek at Roland's clothes a little embarrassedly. She naturally saw nothing. While she was resting, Roland had already washed the clothes. It was not troublesome. Just use the wind to sweep away the dust, rinse with water, and finally dry with fire. It would be done in a few minutes. After seeing no traces, Hela breathed a sigh of relief. She raised her head and met Roland's gaze. Although Roland thought it was nothing, after all, it was normal for children to cry. In Hela's previous life, she was just a junior high school student. However, Hela felt a little embarrassed. In her opinion, Roland was of the same age as her. Although she knew that she was a little dependent on Roland, it was still too embarrassing to hug Roland and cry. Fortunately, she didn't say those words. While Hela was glad that she didn't speak while crying, she also tried to change the subject. She took out the blessing stored in her space bracelet and said. This is the blessing obtained from the sacrifice. As for the crown of domination, I have teleported it to the cave. Yes, I know. Roland nodded slightly, took out the high priest's staff and absorbed and stored all the blessings in front of him. At the same time, he showed the crown of domination on his finger to Hela. Hela got off the bed and asked in a natural way. Then, where are we going next? Although it can be seen that Hela is changing the subject, since Hela doesn't want to mention her, Roland will naturally not provoke her and took up her topic. Let's go back to the Massimo school. The knowledge exchanged with them has not been obtained yet, and the horse we bought is still there. Yes. Hela nodded, and then, under the pretext of collecting undead, she fled the scene. Looking at Hela, who ran to the corner of the cave and collected the undead in the cave one by one into the space bracelet, Roland smiled and said nothing. After cleaning up everything in the cave, Roland used another spell to collapse the cave and cover up all traces, and then the two of them headed back to the direction of the Massimo school. After Roland and Hela set off, Roland also sent the news of his safety to the Massimo school through the Book of Wisdom. These days, the forum of the Book of Wisdom has been quite lively because of Roland's affairs. At first, when Roland disappeared, the Massimo school planned to block the news. After all, the kidnapping of the invited guests would affect the image of the school. Moreover, as the school that sent Roland the Book of Wisdom, they could also confirm that Roland was not dead through the Book of Wisdom. Therefore, they hoped to block the news, rescue Roland as soon as possible, and then think of a way to bribe Roland. It would be best to pretend that nothing happened. However, Roland is not an unknown little character. Roland has been answering various questions on the official public forum. Even if he is busy all day, Roland will reply to a few question posts. His fame has long been spread. Therefore, after Roland disappeared and was not active on the forum for several days, some spellcasters who had been following Roland on the forum and trying to learn something from him also found something wrong. Then, after waiting for several days and asking questions under the posts that Roland answered but not receiving any answers, they posted a thread to ask other people on the forum. Then, the verbal battle centered on Roland began again. Some people thought that Roland might have something wrong, maybe he was doing some key experiment, or preparing for a promotion, and didn't have time to waste on the forum. Some people also thought that Roland had achieved his goal and didn't want to waste time on the forum anymore. In short, just like the previous discussion about why Roland suddenly answered questions on the forum on a large scale, the two factions supporting Roland and opposing Roland started arguing again. However, compared with the last time, because Roland kept replying frequently, the side supporting Roland successfully suppressed the other side. And this time, because Roland disappeared too suddenly and there was no news at all, the opposing voices dominated the mainstream. All kinds of speculations, even slanders, were posted on Roland. This was the first time that the Massimo school encountered such a situation, and they didn't know how to deal with it. The official public forum was directly managed by the Truth Council, and the Massimo school had no power to control public opinion, not to mention that they didn't understand what public opinion was. After intense internal discussions and arguments, the Massimo school finally made a decision to post a clarification on the official forum using the school's official account, and asked the forum administrator to pin it to the top of the forum to explain Roland's situation to all spellcasters who were paying attention to this matter. Roland did not quit the internet, he was just arrested. Chapter 100. Although Roland encountered many accidents these days, in the core city of the Massimo School of Blue Glory, he was ambushed by the Silent Court. After knowing the existence of the Crown of Domination, he took the initiative to come to the base camp of the Silent Court. As a result, he met the old thing from more than 1,000 years ago, the Lich King. After a fight with him, he was forced to flee to the time and space turbulence. If Roland had not been more skilled, he would have been killed by the Lich King. However, although a lot of things happened, it was not long since Roland was ambushed by the Silent Court, only more than 10 days. Moreover, Roland's confrontation with the Silent Court and the Lich King was only the first 3 days. For the rest of the time, Roland spent it in the time and space turbulence. Although Roland did not feel that much time had passed in the time and space turbulence, in the material world, more than 10 days had indeed passed. After reporting his safety to the Massimo school, Roland became active again on the forum and continued to answer various questions. Although some people on the forum were eager to ask who had attacked Roland, in order to save some face for the Massimo school, Roland did not answer. As a forum that only serves spellcasters in the land of the Tower of Truth, the number of active people on the official forum is actually very small. In the previous life, it could only be regarded as a niche, unknown small forum at best. Therefore, after Roland became active again, those who should raise questions raised questions, and those who lost their targets quickly fell silent. Various rumors quickly subsided, and the official forum quickly returned to its normal state. Since the active area of the Court of Silence was not far from the control area of the Massimo school, Roland and Hilary entered the control area of the Massimo school in less than 3 days. Since Roland informed the Massimo school in advance, the Massimo school also sent someone to pick up Roland and escorted them all the way back to the Blue Glory. While escorting, the spellcasters sent by the Massimo school also had in-depth exchanges with Roland on the existence of the Court of Silence. Although the Massimo school carried out a large-scale sweep of the area under its control and wiped out a large number of secret societies, the actions of the Court of Silence were only carried out by the heirs. The branch of the Court of Silence on the side of the Massimo school had no idea what had happened. Therefore, even if the Massimo school wiped out several branches of the Court of Silence, they did not know that the murderer was the Court of Silence. If Roland had not replied to them, the Massimo school would have planned to ask the prophecy caster for help. After Roland returned, the Massimo school was relieved, but also determined to teach those secret societies a lesson. Therefore, except for the existence of the Lich King and the Crown of Domination, Roland did not tell the Massimo school about the other information about the Court of Silence. After all, Roland only destroyed the headquarters of the Court of Silence, and some of the scattered branches were still intact. Moreover, during the invasion, a 4th ring spellcaster escaped. which might cause Roland some trouble in the future. Roland was too lazy to waste time chasing and killing, so he planned to use the power of the Massimo School to completely crush the secret society of the Court of Silence. After receiving the information provided by Roland, the Massimo School immediately sent out an execution team. After exchanging opinions with the neighboring school and obtaining permission for passage and violence, the execution team began to conduct a comprehensive sweep of various strongholds of the Court of Silence. Since Roland's affairs had been known to the entire Tower of Truth, the actions of the Massimo School were all public, and every village and town of the neighboring school was carefully searched. When Roland returned to the Blue Glory, all the secret societies hiding in the neighboring school were indiscriminately attacked by the Massimo School and killed completely. Moreover, since the Massimo School made public its action report, the various schools in the Tower of Truth were surprised to find that the situation of secret societies had become so serious. In the control area of just 2 schools, the Massimo School actually discovered more than 20 secret societies and nearly 100 secret bases. This immediately sounded the alarm for the schools in the Tower of Truth. Secret societies belong to the gray area in the Tower of Truth, and strictly speaking, they are illegal and illegal. After all, it is not very troublesome to establish a school in the Tower of Truth. As long as it does not violate the general rules of the school, the Tower of Truth will agree to the establishment of the school. And even if there is no 4th ring spellcaster and it is impossible to apply for the establishment of a school, you can also form a society without establishment requirements and conduct public activities and gatherings as a society. Only those organizations that violate the general rules of the school, are unwilling to accept the management of the Tower of Truth, conspiracy organizations within the Empire, or foreign forces interfere, etc., which cannot pass the review of the Tower of Truth, will secretly form secret societies. In short, secret societies are basically not good things. However, because secret societies are relatively hidden, in the past, as long as they didn't jump out and taunt them, the schools of the Tower of Truth didn't bother to pay attention to them. However, the public raid of the Massimo School made the school realize that something was wrong. The secret society that was once thought to be weak has now quietly grown so huge. Not only has it secretly controlled a large number of villages and towns, it even has mid-level spellcasters. What is it trying to do? This is digging into the foundation and ecological niche of the school. This is no longer an ordinary secret society, it must be dealt a heavy blow. Soon, influenced by the Massimo School, one school after another began to sweep and cleanse their own controlled areas. With their actions, more and more secret societies were exposed. Although the existence of high-level spellcasters has not been discovered, at most there are a few 4th-level spellcasters of unknown origin. But the huge number still alarmed the ruling body of the Tower of Truth, the Parliament of Truth. The issue of secret societies became a motion in the Parliament of Truth. Soon, after an urgent discussion in the Parliament of Truth, the means of dealing with secret societies were also handed down to each school. The Parliament of Truth required the schools to contribute manpower and form special teams to conduct a general cleanup of the entire Tower of Truth from top to bottom, annihilate all secret societies, and execute all members. At the same time, the schools were required to strengthen their control over the villages and towns in their respective controlled areas. If they could not do so, they would hand over the control of these villages and towns to the legal primary schools to rule. Anyway, no matter what, the Parliament of Truth strictly prohibited the occurrence of secret societies controlling villages and towns. Sitting at the table, Roland sighed as he read the notice on the official forum of the Parliament of Truth. It seems that most of the secret societies that are causing trouble everywhere will be destroyed in the future. Chapter 101. Looking at the announcements on the official forum, Roland felt that the future of this world was getting more and more interesting. In the plot of the previous life, the Tower of Truth never discovered the problem of secret societies, so that the secret societies grew and expanded, and finally stabbed the Tower of Truth severely in the back. Although the Tower of Truth finally withstood the combined external and internal attacks, the losses were also quite heavy. And what will happen if the Tower of Truth of the internal secret society is cleaned out in advance? The famous secret society in the future will be nipped in the bud. What direction will Signer's future development take? Although he doesn't know the future, one thing Roland can be sure of is that in this world affected by his flapping wings, Signer's direction is destined to be different from his previous life. Roland did not feel confused because of the unknown future. On the contrary, he found it quite interesting. An unchanged future is boring. No matter whether the future is getting better or worse, change is always good. It is not Roland's style to tie one's hands in order to maintain the future direction and the plot of his previous life. Roland didn't come, the plot was like this, but if Roland came, the future would still be like that, so wasn't Roland's coming in vain? He smiled, closed the Book of Wisdom, and looked at the table. Among the various extraordinary knowledge sent by the Massimo school, almost all the basic theoretical knowledge Roland needed was present. This was a reward in the name of helping Remy complete the project. The items delivered were obviously much more than Roland expected. I guess some of them were an apology for Roland's surprise attack. Roland put away the grimoire and started learning these extraordinary knowledge to fill in the basic theoretical knowledge he lacked. No matter how things change in the future, strength is the pillar that supports Roland's safety. Although Roland was the fuse that ignited the Tower of Truth for a major purge, Roland fell silent when the entire Tower of Truth was beaten and killed. Roland focused almost all his energy on integrating basic theoretical knowledge into his own player theory system. Apart from answering questions on the forum every day, Roland would only be active within Blue Glory at most. Although when Roland first returned to Blue Glory, some members of the Massimo school were dissatisfied with Roland for increasing their workload. However, as they dug out the headquarters of the Court of Silence from the ground in the school next door and sensed the high-level spells and even the breath of legendary spells left behind, the attitude of the Massimo school towards Roland became a little better. At least he won't look down on Roland. The Massimo school believes that Roland may be a high-level spellcaster. This is one of the reasons why the Massimo school compiled a copy of the basic theories within the school and gave it to Roland in order to befriend him. In this regard, Roland chose not to take the initiative or refuse. As long as they did not ask clearly about Roland's strength, Roland would not tell them. Although Roland's attitude is somewhat ambiguous and makes people a little suspicious, as Roland plays a key role in various projects of the Massimo school, from projects for intermediate spellcasters to projects for high-level spellcasters, Roland can give straightforward advice. After all, Roland has seen most of the products of their successful projects in his previous life. It is not difficult to work back from the results. Moreover, even for some projects that have not seen the results, Roland's knowledge can still give him some pointers. Basically, any spellcaster who has spent time with Roland will admire Roland's rich knowledge and practical experience, as well as his crazy ideas that barely consider safety. Therefore, although Roland did not say it, everyone in the Massimo school chose to treat Roland as a wild high-level spellcaster. For spellcasters, knowledge is power. Roland can understand so many things, no matter how weak his strength is, he can't be much worse. Moreover, Roland's thinking is so crazy, and he can still live safely until now, he must be capable. Otherwise, he would have rolled over and died during the experiment. Moreover, Roland treats low and mid-level spellcasters equally. What does this mean? This shows that in Roland's eyes, there is nothing special about mid-level spellcasters, they are almost the same as low-level spellcasters. This undoubtedly deepened the Massimo school's stereotype of Roland as a high-level spellcaster. Even, because there are rumors that Roland has the same attitude when talking to high-level spellcasters. So much so that some people within the Massimo school even doubted whether Roland was an old monster living in seclusion with the Moon Elf. Although Roland had heard some news about the various speculations of the Massimo school, he did not pay much attention to them. Instead, he took advantage of the opportunity when the Massimo school was open to him, constantly visiting various spellcasters and communicating with them, like a sponge, constantly absorbing all kinds of knowledge accumulated by the Massimo school. Of course, this kind of communication is beneficial to both parties. Roland gave another world where countless players constantly experimented and summed up various theories and practical experiences, while Massimo's spellcaster also gave various theoretical knowledge of the school. Strictly speaking, the Massimo school still took advantage. What they handed over to Roland were only basic things, like the bottom of tea box stuff of the school, and nothing was leaked to Roland. If Roland hadn't been unwilling to join the school and was bound by the school, he could have gotten most of what Roland needed by joining any university school. However, Roland thought that he only paid a small part of the backward player's theory and practical experience, and got what he wanted without revealing any advanced knowledge, which was equivalent to getting something for nothing, win. The Massimo school believed that they could only pay some common knowledge within the school, and exchanged it for the theory and experimental experience summarized by a suspected high-level spellcaster, expanding the theoretical base of the school, win. In the eyes of both parties, they had won. Therefore, when both parties thought they had won, the relationship between Roland and the Massimo school also heated up rapidly. The school leadership waved their hands and opened many places to Roland. For example, elements and energy are abundant, used to help spellcasters to advance, or special places for sublimation. In the core area of Blue Glory, a building that had not been used for several years suddenly started. With the opening of the building, a large amount of converted energy began to be continuously injected into the building, and the energy fluctuations visible to the naked eye covered most of the city. Beside the building, several passing spellcasters from the school of Massimo were looking at the suddenly activated building with some surprise. Chapter 102. A steady stream of energy poured into the building from all directions. Through the transformation array inside the building, all of this energy was transformed into ultra-high concentrations of dark elements. The thick dark elements were transformed and released inside the building. Due to the extremely high concentration, the dark elements were clearly visible and even blocked the lights in the room. Inside the dark element, a figure was sitting cross-legged in the center, and the thick dark elements around her were being absorbed by her. Outside the room, Roland sat on a chair beside him, rocking the chair leisurely and idly. After absorbing the theoretical knowledge of the Massimo school, Roland also reorganized his knowledge system and handed over a safer promotion plan to Hella. And Hella was also quite competitive. Her own talent was of the top type, and she had enough resources for meditation and practice. In addition to her childhood experience in the north, she was also very hard-working. In fact, Hella had reached the limit of the third ring when she lived in the Kess Mountains. It was just that Roland was worried about problems and did not let her be promoted. Therefore, after learning the promotion plan taught by Roland, she spent a few days adjusting her state, and then began to promote to the fourth ring. In order to increase the success rate of Hella's promotion, Roland also applied for the use of the sublimation room from the Massimo school. Compared with Roland's wild promotion in the Kos Mountains, the sublimation room carefully built by the Massimo school can provide more and better help. Although some places are backward, the safety is still much better than the promotion in the wild. In addition, Roland himself is still here. Even if Hella fails, even the protection measures of the sublimation room can't save her. Roland can also personally go down and pull Hella back. At most, he will spend some blessings to squeeze the crown of domination. The Lich King can squeeze it, but I, Roland, can't squeeze it. As long as the shield of death rejection works, everything will be fine. Do you understand the value of the legendary spell Shield of Death Rejection? Let alone the sublimation of the fourth ring, even if the sublimation of the seventh ring fails, it can be pulled back for you. Although I said so, it was a bit boring to stay by the side all the time. After all, in order to avoid Hella's accident and his inability to react, Roland could not read books or go to the forum to kill time. In fact, in order to be an insurance for Hella, Roland had already stated on the forum that he had something to do in the next period of time and would be offline for 10 days or half a month. Roland looked at the ceiling with dull eyes. He could only focus part of his attention on Hella, and the rest of his energy was just waiting in a daze. Due to sufficient preparation, and the plan for promotion and sublimation was mainly based on safety. Therefore, although Hella spent much more time than Roland, it took more than 2 months, almost 70 days, but fortunately everything went well. When a familiar breath of a fourth ring caster was released in the sublimation room, the idle Roland was also shocked and looked into the sublimation room. In the room, as the last dark element was absorbed, Hella completed the sublimation and slowly opened her eyes. Her black eyes became deeper, and the power of the dead soul swirled and flowed in her eyes. The overflowing magic power and mental power spread unreliably around. Fortunately, the sublimation room had long been prepared for such things. The sublimation room, which was built with a lot of money, almost intactly defended these magic power and mental power that had no malice, but were simply overflowing. Hella also reacted and quickly gathered her overflowing power. Then, she looked in the direction of Roland with some hesitation. The power that expanded several times after sublimation still exceeded Hella's preparation. Even if she was gifted, she needed time to adapt. But Roland should have waited for a long time. He should adapt to the power first, or adjust well, don't rush. Roland's voice came from outside the room, interrupting her concerns and thoughts. After hearing Roland's words, Hella also nodded, sat cross-legged on the spot, and began to meditate, adapting to the power after sublimation. While Hella was adapting to the power, Roland relaxed a lot. He took out a map from his space bracelet and began to think about which school to visit next. Roland's purpose of coming to the Massimo school has been almost completed. Through the basic theories provided by the Massimo school, Roland has made up for his lack of various theoretical foundations. It fills the problem that the player's theoretical system focuses on practice and lacks theoretical foundation. Although Roland's progress is relatively slow, he has not been able to completely combine the local theoretical system and the player's theoretical system to complement each other and perfectly integrate them. However, the remaining integration work can be done by him slowly. Therefore, after collecting the theoretical foundation, it is not meaningful to stay at the Massimo school. However, Roland does not intend to leave the Tower of Truth just like that. After all, although the Tower of Truth is of little value to him, it is still a good place for Hela. First of all, there are enough spellcasters in the Tower of Truth, which can let Hela see the world more, so that she won't be cheated by others with cheap junk in the future. It's okay to cheat money, Roland doesn't lack money anyway, but if he is cheated of his feelings, Roland can't accept it. At the same time, it can also let Hela recognize her own strength, so that she won't feel that she is not strong enough when she goes out in the future, and she will be cautious and restrained. Besides, Hela has excellent talent, so she should learn something from other schools, learn to look at problems from multiple perspectives, and learn to think independently. She can't always learn from Roland. If Hela doesn't think at all and accepts everything Roland teaches, that would be too bad. Such a Hela will definitely not become a legend. In addition, girls of Hela's age probably need friends. Since the two left the north, Hela has basically been following Roland. She doesn't have any friends of the same age. Moreover, Roland usually has a lot of things to do, and basically can only squeeze out a little time to chat with Hela a day. In this feudal and backward environment of this world, Hela, as a superhuman, probably has nothing in common with ordinary people. Maybe other spellcasters of the same age in the Tower of Truth are more suitable to make friends with Hela? Thinking of this, Roland looked at a school at the edge of the map. The Soul School, a university school that studies dark elements and necromancy, is the largest and strongest school among all the schools that study dark elements and necromancy in the Tower of Truth. It can be said to be a first-tier university school. However, due to the political correctness of the Silver Empire, the control area of the Soul School is not only relatively remote and small, but also, in the Truth Council, the Soul School is the only university school among the first-tier universities with only 2 seats. Moreover, these 2 representatives have never made their voices heard in the Truth Council, and their presence is almost zero. There is another chapter, which will be posted later. Chapter 103. Roland placed his finger on the Soul School on the map and silently thought about the situation of this school in his previous life. After all, he is a college student, but why is there no news at all in the later stages of the plot? Oh, I found it, the first university sect to be destroyed in the Tower of Truth. No wonder there is no soul sect in the subsequent plot. It turns out that it is completely dead. Roland silently checked the plot of his previous life and confirmed the time of the demise of the Soul School, Silver Calendar 1480, which was still far from their demise. After confirming the death time of the Soul School, Roland also confirmed him as the next target of their visit. Roland is proficient in all departments and can go to any school. However, in Hela's situation, the Soul School, which studies dark elements and necromancy, is undoubtedly the best choice. After all, Hela mainly focuses on learning dark elements and necromancy. After determining the target, Roland also put away the map and waited for Hela silently. After waiting for several more days, Hela finally adapted to her soaring power and walked out of the sublimation room. Later, due to some interpersonal interactions and trivial matters related to research projects, Roland stayed at Blue Glory for more than half a month. After finishing the trivial matters and politely declining the invitation to join the Massimo School, Roland and Hela said goodbye to the Massimo School and headed towards the Soul School. Due to the incident in the Court of Silence, Roland's account on the forum was also blocked. Originally, the only people who knew Roland's identity were the middle to high-level spellcasters of the university school. However, after the Court of Silence incident, some careful spellcasters also discovered the time when Roland appeared in the Massimo School and the time when the forum account became active again. Almost. In addition, Roland did not deliberately conceal his identity, so Roland's identity was discovered and quickly spread. Now, basically everyone paying attention to Roland in the Tower of Truth knows Roland's identity. Being opened is not a bad thing, at least not for Roland. After the news about Roland's identity and suspicion of being a high-level spellcaster were exposed, all the posts on the official forum that were unhappy with Roland or questioned him disappeared immediately. Although Roland doesn't care much about these messy things, it's nice not to have them. On the way to the Soul School, the journey can be said to be quite smooth. Every school passing by along the way will complete the review as quickly as possible and release Roland, and no one will let Roland on the right of way. In addition, the schools are cleaning up all secret societies in all aspects of the Tower of Truth. Like some small-scale bandits who hide in the mountains and forests and survive, even if they don't show up, they are attacked and killed completely. Villages and small towns were also laid off and executed in large numbers. At the request of the school, a large number of spellcasters from the school walked out of the laboratory and took office directly to carry out drastic cleansing of villages and towns that were seriously infiltrated by secret societies. Anyone associated with the secret society was rounded up and, depending on the circumstances, fined, imprisoned, and executed. Hundreds of people were executed almost every day. Under the instructions of the Parliament of Truth and the violent and bloody suppression of various schools of thought, the Tower of Truth is now filled with a solemn and tense atmosphere. Roland walks on the road and encounters spellcasters sent out on patrol almost every day. Who dares to jump out and seek death at this time? However, although the killing was bloody, it had nothing to do with Roland. Roland has the guarantee of the Massimo School, and no one will come to arrest them. Therefore, Roland and Hela could leisurely watch everything that happened on the Tower of Truth. Although the purges at the Tower of Truth were bloody, they showed no mercy to secret societies and killed them in large numbers. However, from the perspective of the Tower of Truth, these are necessary means. To the Tower of Truth, secret societies are parasites that cling to them and constantly suck blood. They expand wantonly in villages and small towns, eroding the local interests of the Tower of Truth, corroding and destroying the control of their respective schools. District rule. It has even replaced the ecological niche of university students in villages and small towns. It is impossible for any interest group to tolerate the theft of its own interest niche by other interest groups. If the opponent is strong enough, they will just tolerate it with a grudge. But a secret society, a group of rotten fish and shrimps, still dare to challenge the schools? Therefore, in order to protect one's own interests, it is normal behavior to deal with secret societies harshly and kill them. If the secret society were a legal product, the schools might not be so ruthless. However, the secret society itself is an illegal product and can be legally suppressed and disbanded, or even directly physically wiped out. Why should it be kept? Of course, from the perspective of a secret society, the university sect is extremely evil. They obviously occupy so many resources, so what's the point of giving them a little? Moreover, the university school also monopolizes intermediate and advanced extraordinary knowledge. If you want to obtain this knowledge, you must either work for the school and save silver points to exchange for it, or join the school and accept the shackles of the school, or like Roland, use your own exchange for knowledge. Otherwise, don't expect to get any high-end knowledge from them. For spellcasters who crave knowledge but don't want to be bound, the university sect is really abominable. Why not make all knowledge available to the public for free? In fact, secret societies use the provision of extraordinary knowledge for free as bait to attract spellcasters who are not determined and want to take advantage of others. Roland's comment on this idiot is, well said, first make the extraordinary knowledge you know public for free. Moreover, secret societies are not as free as university schools. At least the requirements and conditions for joining and leaving university schools are clearly visible. What about secret societies? Many people who join will be cursed, and the lower level personnel are completely treated as free slaves and consumables by the upper levels. It is precisely because of the dirty and bloody nature of secret societies that after being raided by schools and publicly exposed on the official forum, the bloody cleansing of secret societies by the Tower of Truth has been unanimously agreed by the Tower of Truth. Even the wild mages without schools support the actions of the schools. Today it is them, maybe tomorrow it will be their turn? This evil organization is no longer an ordinary secret society, and it must be dealt with heavily. Otherwise, in this parliamentary republic territory where spellcasters have freedom of speech, such a bloody massacre would have caused dissatisfaction long ago. Of course, secret societies are not necessarily all bad. There are always one or two secret societies that have just been established and have not yet fallen. It must be unfair to kill them all, but who made them unlucky to encounter the great purge of the Tower of Truth? Almost 500 fake followers, the First Order should be able to get 100, right? Chapter 104. Although almost all areas of the Tower of Truth were in turmoil in order to purge secret societies. However, in this noisy purge, there were still some schools that were relatively quiet. For example, Roland's target of this trip was the Soul School. Due to its remote location, relatively scarce resources, and the environmental transformation of the control area by the Soul School, the population living here can be said to be quite sparse. Moreover, due to the harsh elemental environment, ordinary people, except for spellcasters, cannot live in the wild. Therefore, the population of the Soul School is all concentrated in several core cities, completely under the direct control of the Soul School. The flow of population and the inflow and outflow of materials are all under the direct control of the school, and there is no room for secret societies to survive. After receiving the instructions from the Truth Council, the Soul School simply checked a few times and everything was back to normal. Standing outside the control area of the Soul School, Roland was looking at the area covered with dark clouds in front of him. Compared to the Massimo School, the dark clouds in the Soul School's control area were full of darkness, as if they had absorbed all the light, and seemed a little lifeless. The road that runs through the Soul School's control area is also extremely dim, with only some faint green lights that flicker like flames. Looking at the area in front of him that looks like a devil's cave, Roland glanced at Hela beside him, and he regretted it a little. In such a big place, are there really people of the same age who can make friends with Hela? However, he has already sent a visit application to the Soul School, and the other side has also returned Roland. He can't just turn around and leave. I'll find an excuse to run away after a few days. Roland thought so while putting a shield on the entire carriage, including the 2 horses. High concentrations of dark elements are harmful to ordinary life forms. If they stay there without protection for half an hour, the inherent corrosiveness can kill ordinary creatures on the spot. After adding the shield, the 2 horses walked in slowly under Roland's command. As the carriage went deeper, the light behind became smaller and smaller, and finally disappeared. Roland and Hela could only see a dark world and a slightly weird green flame. If it were an ordinary person, they would probably be scared to death at this time. However, all fear comes from the unknown and insufficient firepower. However, for Roland and Hela, there is no unknown in front of them, just a normal environment where dark elements gather. Moreover, the Soul School has also made adjustments and modifications. If you look closely, the environment is just a little darker, and there is nothing strange. It is much more normal than what Roland saw on the North Sea Dead Island a few years ago. However, compared with the smaller Dead Island, the control area of the Soul School is much larger. After all, it is a university school, which is relatively small compared to other university schools, but it is not too small. Therefore, Roland and Hela walked along the road for almost 3 days and 3 nights before arriving at the core city of the Soul School, Black Domain. As the city with the largest population of the Soul School, the environment of Black Domain is relatively good. At least, there were enough lights, bright enough, not so dark, and the thick dark elements were filtered, making them more stable and gentle, without any corrosiveness. Glancing at the city illuminated by a huge green ball of light, Roland looked at the spellcasters who came to greet them. A 4th ring spellcaster from the Soul School, and several 2nd ring spellcaster assistants. The leading 4th ring spellcaster saluted politely, leaned over and stretched out his hand, and said, "Welcome, Mr. Roland, this way." Roland returned the salute slightly, and then, under his guidance, he moved into the room prepared for them by the Soul School. After a day of rest, Roland began to contact the spellcasters of the Soul School, exchanging and communicating on various spells and research on dark elements and undead. Adhering to the principle of being here, Roland visited everywhere and soon became active in the Black Domain. While Roland was active, Hela was also let go by Roland. Hela is already a 4th ring spellcaster, and with the help of Grey Crow, even if she encounters an enemy that she cannot hit, she will definitely be able to escape. Moreover, Roland lets her do whatever she wants. If Hela encounters any trouble and sends him a message, he will immediately go to support her. Therefore, in order to train Hela, Roland drove Hela out of the room when she wanted to stay in the room to read. Standing on the street in the Black Domain, Hela, who had never expected to be driven out by Roland, was holding the magic book and looking around in confusion. When Roland drove her out, he did not give her any clear goals. This made her not know what to do. Before she met Roland, when she lived with the tribe, Hela helped the tribe with chores every day, or followed her parents' instructions and did some cleaning chores. After meeting Roland, except when she was more proactive when killing cultists, she followed Roland at other times and did whatever Roland said. Hela, who was used to following others' instructions, was not used to making decisions on her own. Holding the magic book, Hela turned her head and glanced at the magic tower behind her, feeling a little uneasy. After hesitating for a while, Hela finally found a direction and walked down the road. Hela walked to a square, looked around, and then found a place to sit down. Then, she put the magic book on her legs, opened it, and activated the Book of Wisdom. She planned to go to the forum to find some inspiration. What do ordinary spellcasters usually do? Hela flipped through the forum posts, looking for useful information. After flipping through the posts for more than half an hour and reading a lot of posts, Hela closed the magic book thoughtfully. In the Tower of Truth, whether it is a wild mage or a school spellcaster, there is one thing that cannot be avoided. That is to complete the school commission and earn silver points. In the Tower of Truth, unless you stay in the starting city and pay with gold coins, otherwise, in other places, daily life requires silver points to maintain. Moreover, if a spellcaster wants to improve his own power or do some experiments, he needs new extraordinary knowledge and a lot of materials, which all require silver points to buy. Even if a school spellcaster enjoys discounts within the school, it is still inevitable to do school commissions. Only Roland had dug so many ruins in the Kess Mountains before, so he was not short of materials, and most of the knowledge was exchanged. As for daily consumption, the silver points Roland earned from answering questions on the forum were enough for the two of them to spend on daily expenses. If Roland hadn't supported her, Hela would have been running around for a living. Thinking of this, Hela looked at some shops on the street. There's no rush to put it on the shelves. Anyway, I'm sure I won't be able to get full attendance this month, so I plan to wait until the recommendation is over and then ask the editor. Revision, please take the above words as bullshit. This book will be on the shelves on Friday this week. Chapter 105. Hela walked out of the shop with a map of the Black Domain in her hand. After looking at the map for a while, Hela walked towards the southwest area of the Black Domain. According to the coordinates of the map, the Spellcaster Association of the Black Domain is in the southwest area. Hela planned to go over and take a look. After memorizing the map, Hela also put the map away. Although she was driven out by Roland, Hela's space bracelet still stored a lot of supplies. Roland also transferred 1,000 silver points to her account. It was not a problem to meet her daily consumption. Therefore, she had no pressure to survive. So, Hela walked along the road and admired the city of Black Domain. As a genius with a high affinity for dark elements, Hela's perception of Black Domain is much better than that of Blue Glory. Although the Black Domain is a bit dark and the buildings are a bit simple, or old, from the appearance alone, the Black Domain is completely inferior to Blue Glory. However, the rich dark element environment makes up for his shortcomings. No matter how the building looks, it makes Hela feel at home against the backdrop of the dark elements. The soul fires patrolling the city, responsible for public security, and acting as lights wander in the air. Several soul fires even approached Hela and circled around her. The round soul fires changed their shapes, expressing friendliness to Hela like puppies. However, since they still had their own responsibilities, they couldn't stay for long. Generally, they would fly away reluctantly after circling for 1 or 2 minutes. Hela smiled and waved goodbye to them who led the way for her. Although they didn't have much wisdom and only had some basic instincts, they could still show Hela the way. After saying goodbye to them, Hela turned around and looked at the building in front of her. This is a tall building with a small and delicate overall style. In addition to retaining the mark of the traditional Spellcaster Association, it has also undergone localization transformation and added many statues and marks of the Soul School, so as to perfectly integrate into the overall style of the city of Black Domain. After taking a look, Hela walked in boldly. Although the emergence and application of the Book of Wisdom has changed the way information flows in the Tower of Truth to a certain extent, if you want to accept the commission of the school, you still have to go to the Spellcaster Association offline. One of the main reasons is that the bottom-level spellcasters do not have extra silver points to buy a Book of Wisdom that belongs to them, and they are the main undertakers of the school commission. In addition, the scope of use of the Book of Wisdom is not large. Now it cannot even cover the entire Silver Empire. Moreover, outside the Silver Tower, the delay of the Book of Wisdom is also quite serious. The reception and transmission are delayed by several days or even months depending on the distance. Moreover, the scale of the Spellcaster Association is very large. As an official subordinate organization of the Tower of Truth, the Spellcaster Association not only covers the entire Silver Empire, but also has branches in other human countries in East and West NAR, and even in some alien countries. For such a large-scale organization, no matter how small the adjustment is, it is a troublesome thing for the entire organization. What's more, making huge adjustments to the core business of commissions. The time and cost of the adjustment will not be small. Moreover, such adjustments and updates cannot be made as you wish. The internal interest groups of such large organizations will not sit still and wait for death. Therefore, considering various factors, the Spellcaster Association still retains the original offline model. And through the foraying Spellcaster badge updated by Hella at the Massimo School, Hella naturally completed the basic registration easily. After reading through the various commissions of the Spellcaster Association, Hella also decided to try some simple commissions first. A commission to deal with abnormal environment entered Hella's eyes. This is a very common commission among various schools. Basically, every school, as long as it has some ability, will carry out permanent environmental transformation in the area under its control to better meet the needs of the school's spellcasters. However, this large-scale environmental transformation is always artificially created and is not stable. Even if it is maintained frequently, some abnormalities will often occur. And these abnormalities need to be handled and resolved manually. In addition to the school sending people in person, more are directly attached to the commission of the Spellcaster Association, allowing cheaper wild mages to handle these trivial matters. Depending on the direction of the transformation, the abnormalities that occurred were also different. For example, in the case of the Soul School, it was probably because the concentration of dark elements was too high, which generated some wandering natural undead in the wild. Because the number of accumulations was too large, it affected the balance of environmental transformation. It was also relatively simple to deal with. Just kill all the natural undead you encounter and rebalance the elemental balance. It was not particularly difficult, but it was more time-consuming. Hella looked at some posts on the forum that described similar commissions, and made a decision in her mind. She reached out and took the abnormal handling commission recommended for the third ring spellcaster. Then, Hella took the commission and completed the registration at the front desk. After completing the login, Hella took the commission map and walked hesitantly in the corridor on the second floor, recalling what the front desk had just said to her. Okay, the registration is complete. Oh, it happens that your teammate for this commission is waiting in room 215 on the second floor. You can go and discuss the departure time with her. This is the coordinate map of this commission, please keep it. Why are there teammates? Hella glanced at the commission map in her hand. On the back of it, all the information of the commission was recorded on it. In the requirements that Hella did not pay attention to, there was a prompt to complete the task in a team. Alas! Looking at the sign of room 215 hanging on the door in front of her, Hella sighed helplessly. Just treat it as practicing interpersonal communication. Hella comforted herself. After mustering up the courage, Hella reached out and knocked on the door gently. Then, a cold voice came from the room. Come in. After hearing the reply, Hella gently pushed open the door and walked in. After entering the room, Hella immediately glanced at the room. Among them, her teammate for this commission naturally attracted her attention. Looking at the girl whose dress and temperament were out of tune with the surrounding decorations, Hella was a little curious. But she still imitated Roland, suppressed her inner curiosity, saluted without changing her expression, and said, Hello, my name is Hella, a fourth ring spellcaster. The girl on the opposite side was also a little surprised to see Hella's performance. She slowly stood up, returned the greeting with the etiquette of a noble, and said, Hello. Available this Friday. Chapter 106. Sinner. Bastard. Filth that defiles the sacred bloodline. Daughter of a murderer. Why don't you just die? It's disgusting to be alive. With the ridicule and curses from all around, countless malice swept in from all directions. Even though the target of their abuse was just a little girl under 7 years old, they still had no intention of lowering their voices and vented their malice wantonly. The little girl in tattered clothes numbly listened to the malice around her, lowered her head and took small steps forward. Bang! A leg that suddenly stretched out from nowhere tripped her. She fell heavily to the ground, and dust and filth instantly covered her whole body. Her clothes and skin were torn and mixed together. As blood flowed, severe pain also surged into her heart. She gritted her teeth and endured the pain, without making a sound or crying. Because she knew that this was of no use, but would make them more excited. She supported her body and climbed up with gritted teeth. Boom! With the thunder, drops of rain fell from the sky. After a burst of hurried footsteps, the servants took umbrellas and quickly blocked the rain. The young masters and young ladies were well protected. Under the effect of the magic spells of the umbrellas, there was not even a drop of rain on them. But the little girl who got up again did not have such treatment. She was already in a mess, and she looked even more embarrassed under the rain. Several young masters and young ladies glanced at her with disdain, and cursed a few more times. After getting no response, they turned around and left because they felt bored. After they left, the little girl also lowered her head, biting her lips and moving forward in the increasingly heavy rain. When she walked to a dilapidated wooden house, she had completely become a drowned chicken. A young-looking girl wearing the same old clothes quickly pulled her into the wooden house. The girl quickly took off the girl's wet clothes, wiped her body with a dry towel, and changed into new clothes. At the same time, she looked at the torn clothes and the bleeding wound, and her face darkened slightly. She stretched out her left hand and gently stroked the girl's wound. The gentle magic power slowly flowed from her hand, and the wound quickly healed and recovered. After healing the girl's wound, the girl smiled and said softly, "The meal is ready, you eat first, Mom has something to go out for." As she said that, the girl with a fist in her right hand stood up, turned around, her face instantly became ugly, and she was about to leave the wooden house with big strides. At this moment, the girl stretched out her hand, pulled her, and said, "Don't go. Mother." Sitting on the sofa in the room, Sophia closed her eyes, tilted her head, and silently missed her mother in her heart. At this moment, a knock on the door rang. Sophia was awakened from her memory. She glanced at the door and said, "Come in." As her voice fell, a girl with black hair and black eyes, dressed appropriately, pushed the door and walked in. She was wearing a robe made of unknown extraordinary materials, and the aura she exuded inadvertently showed the extremely high quality of the robe. The magic book in her right hand was extraordinary just by the shell. The gems inlaid on it were worth a fortune. Although they did not look so gorgeous and luxurious, they represented a strong foundation under the simple appearance. The identity of the girl in front of her was definitely not simple. She must be a noble or the heir of a school. Tisk, unlucky. This was the kind of person she didn't want to see the most. Therefore, guys with this background also knew her situation and would not give her a good face. Just as she was about to face the malicious abuse from the opposite side, she heard a polite greeting and introduction. "Hello, my name is Hella, a fourth-ring spellcaster." The girl in front of her seemed to be unaware of her situation, and politely performed a greeting between spellcasters, with a gentle and calm tone. Sophia was stunned for a moment. Doesn't she know about me? Maybe I just came to the black domain and don't know what I look like. Sophia laughed at herself in her heart. As long as she revealed her identity, the guy in front of her would also reveal her malice. Thinking of this, she stood up slowly, returned the greeting and said with the noble etiquette her mother had taught her. "Hello, I'm Sophia, a threaring spellcaster." After completing her self-introduction, Sophia did not wait for the disgusted look she thought. As if treating ordinary people, the girl named Hella walked up and sat in front of her. Even when she was surprised and didn't speak first, the girl in front of her took the initiative to break the strange silence and chat with her. She didn't seem to care about Sophia's identity at all. Sophia responded to Hella's words uncomfortably, while observing her with some surprise. "Since there is no problem, how about gathering at the South Gate at 5 p.m. After a conversation in which Sophia herself didn't know what she was talking about, the black-haired girl in front of her suddenly said. Sophia also replied subconsciously. "Yeah, okay." After receiving Sophia's answer, the black-haired girl stood up and smiled brightly at Sophia. At the same time, she stretched out her hand and said, "Then, please give me your guidance for this commission." Sophia also stood up quickly, holding the black-haired girl's hand unexpectedly, and said in an unnatural and nervous tone, "Please give me your guidance." Then, the black-haired girl blinked, glanced at her right hand held by Sophia, and said with a chuckle, "Madam, do you have any more questions?" "Ah? Sorry, it's okay, it's okay." After the black-haired girl reminded her, Sophia reacted and quickly took her hand back. "She wouldn't think of me as some stupid person who doesn't know manners." Sophia, have you forgotten everything your mother gave you before? You have no manners at all." Sophia apologized in a panic. Opposite her, the black-haired girl smiled, waved her hand, and said nonchalantly, "It's okay, you don't have to be so nervous. I'm just an ordinary spellcaster. I'm not afraid to tell you that this is the first time I've received such a commission. I don't know anything yet. I may have to rely on you more when the time comes." Listening to the black-haired girl's words, Sophia slightly raised her right leg and stepped hard on her left toe. The pain forced her to calm down. She seemed to think that I was so nervous because she was a fourth-ring spellcaster? Sophia forced a smile and said in line with the black-haired girl's guess. "You're welcome." Chapter 107. After forcibly calming down and sending the black-haired girl away, Sophia collapsed directly on the sofa in the room. After being in a daze for a while, she finally regained her composure. Sophia sat up from the sofa and began to recall the conversation she had just had with the black-haired girl. Recalling her somewhat silly answer, which was entirely due to the communication process in which Hella took the initiative to bring up the topic, Sophia was numb and wanted to stab herself to death with a knife. "What are you doing? Why are you so stupid? Where is your usual calmness?" Sophia hugged her head and fell into deep self-consumption. Outside the room, Hella, who had just made an appointment with Sophia for the departure time, did not think much about it. Hella herself had not communicated with many strangers. It was good enough to be able to actively communicate and chat with strangers and reach a consensus. As for seeing Sophia's situation, it was too difficult for Hella now. Therefore, Hella, who was completely unaware of the problem and only thought that Sophia was a little strange, seized the time and made various preparations for departure in advance. Travel process planning, maps, compasses, food, tents, spare alchemy potions, spell scrolls, etc. In addition, in order to highlight accidents, Hella also prepared some spells in her magic book in advance. After becoming a fourth-ring spellcaster, Hella can also reserve spells in the magic book in advance, and when needed, cast and burst out instantly. This is her first time to do a commission. Roland is not by her side. Whatever happens, she needs to deal with it herself. It's always right to make more preparations. Although she has a teammate, based on Sophia's performance just now, Hella also seriously doubts her level. Thinking of this, Hella decided that her preparations should be based on the standard that Sophia is useless or even a drag. In the workshop room rented by Hella, Hella looked at the various potions and spell scrolls she had made, thinking about what was missing. Well, she still had to make some preparations to prevent Sophia. She didn't seem to be a necromancer. Hella recalled the aura that Sophia unconsciously exuded and guessed. According to the little tricks that Roland taught her to identify spellcasters, Sophia is most likely a spellcaster of the control system. Speaking of which, it seems that I have heard of the name Sophia somewhere. Hella thought about it, while taking out the materials to be used next from the space bracelet. She also activated the Book of Wisdom and searched for posts about Sophia. Looking at the search results on the forum, Hella stopped her movements in surprise. The sinful blood princess? Or the royal heir? But how could a royal heir fall into Sophia's situation? When Hella saw Sophia for the first time, she thought she was a wild mage. I didn't find anything valuable on her. Is the royal heir doing so badly? With this question in mind, Hella clicked on the post. Although the latest reply to the post was several years ago, and there was a lot of useless information mixed in it. But, after a rough look from beginning to end, Hella also roughly understood Sophia's situation. Sophia is the daughter of the previous Silver Emperor, the young Empress. The offspring was born several years after the Empress lost the throne due to the bloodshed in the capital. According to rumors, the Silver families originally planned to keep the Empress incognito and imprison her until her death. However, for some unknown reason, the Empress who lived alone gave birth to Sophia. As for how she was born, no one knows because of the news blockade of the Silver family. However, although the reason is unknown, the result is still known. The former Empress and her offspring were deprived of their status as Silver nobles. At the same time, because it was the Rose War at the time, the Bloody Rose War caused the bloodshed in Sinner. Therefore, under the guidance of the Silver family, many people blamed the former Empress for the Rose War. It was all because the former Empress was too unsuccessful and ruined the trust of the great nobles in the Silver family. Otherwise, how could the great nobles collude with foreign rulers? Especially after the Rose War ended and the two sides negotiated. In order to avoid further division, both sides unanimously put the blame on the former queen who had lost all her power. This led to the former queen's reputation being completely ruined. Even in the Tower of Truth, the former queen's reputation was the same. Even if the spellcasters knew the real reason for the outbreak of the Rose War, who would offend the consensus of the interest groups in the Silver Empire because of the former queen? And the bad reputation of her mother naturally spread to Sophia, so she was given the title of the Sinful Blood Princess. She was excluded since birth and suffered from all-round discrimination and abuse from top to bottom in the entire Silver Empire. If it weren't for a six-ring spellcaster from the Soul School who took advantage of his relationship with the former queen and used his own identity as a guarantee to bring Sophia from the capital to the Tower of Truth, Sophia would probably die quietly in a corner one day. The Tower of Truth is always better than other places in the Silver Empire. Although the spellcasters here don't like Sophia very much, no one will waste time deliberately targeting her. At least, under the protection of the sixth-ring spellcaster, Sophia can still grow up smoothly. After reading the content of the post, Hela frowned slightly. Based on the situation of the previous queen, Hela can be sure of one thing. Sophia is likely to have inherited the talent of the previous queen and walked on the path of enchantment. However, based on what she learned from Roland, Sophia, an enchantment caster, living in an environment with dark elements and negative energy for a long time, is undoubtedly burying a bomb for herself. As a spell system that controls the mind, enchantment itself is very easy to be extreme. Therefore, it is undoubtedly extremely important to balance positive and negative energy and ensure the stability of one's own mind. Suffering from discrimination and harm since childhood, and living in such an environment full of negative energy for a long time, it is not surprising that Sophia will become a terrorist who does everything in the future. Speaking of which, she is protected by a six-ring necromancer. So she won't take the enchantment spell that controls negative energy as her main learning direction, right? If this is the case, Sophia will probably be finished sooner or later. Hela thinks Sophia is a little pitiful. It's obviously not her fault. She knows nothing but has to bear these heavy costs. Maybe when we were communicating before, Sophia was not because of her strength, but because she rarely received kindness from strangers and was not used to it. Alas, I thought she was weird at the time. Hela sighed and wanted to slap her previous self. Alas, I deserve to die. Chapter 108. Thank you for reading this. This book will be officially launched at 12 o'clock tomorrow. If you have money, you can support it with money, and if you don't have money, you can support it with your body. I am a lazy dog. It is impossible for me to update it frequently. I will never update it frequently in this life. About this book. This book is a combination of a lot of worldviews and settings, and is born through secondary creation. However, the name Millennium War was made up by me. This book does not involve any worldview of the real game Millennium War. In addition, this book is a single female protagonist, and there is only one person who has an intimate relationship with the male protagonist. Revision, including carboan-based organisms, machines, non-humans and any other intelligent life forms. If you can't accept it, please stop the loss in time. In short, please subscribe to the book, I won't do anything. Chapter 109. At the south gate of the Black Domain, Hela arrived at the agreed destination half an hour early. Standing at the gate of the city, Hela put her mental power deep into the space bracelet and reconfirmed her preparations. At the same time, she also allocated part of her energy to watch the flow of people coming around, lest she didn't notice when people came. Hela didn't wait long. She just spent a few minutes checking the contents of the bracelet when she saw a familiar figure in a dark corner from the corner of her eye. She came back to her senses and looked at the familiar figure. Although this figure wore a black robe that isolated perception, Hela could still capture a little bit of Sophia's breath from the black robe. Coupled with the height of the man in black robe, and his little eyes looking around. She is probably Sophia, right? Hela thought for a while and felt that she should take the initiative. So, she strode over. As Hela approached, the man in black robe also noticed her approach. Then, the two looked at each other. After looking at each other, Hela also confirmed that the man in black robe was Sophia. After confirming that it was her teammate this time, Sophia, Hela also smiled at her, waved and said hello. Good afternoon. Since Hela hadn't thought of how to address her yet, calling her by name would definitely not work. Sophia was already wearing a black robe, so she definitely didn't want to reveal her identity. Therefore, Hela could only say hello dryly. Good afternoon, Lord Hela. Sophia seemed to be startled by Hela and shrank unnaturally. A hoarse voice that was completely different from the voice in the room before came from the black robe. Hela was a little surprised. Is Sophia so cautious? Have you encountered any malicious intent here before? Isn't it? What spellcaster would be so bored as to bully a little girl? Although she was a little surprised, Hela didn't say anything. She looked normal and showed no surprise. She walked to Sophia's side and said with a smile. Are you here so early? Sorry for keeping you waiting. No, it's okay. I just arrived. Sophia's disguised hoarse voice came out from the black robe, and her tone was a little panicked. Hela smiled, skipped the topic, and said. Now that we're all here, let's go now. Sophia regained her composure and responded softly. Afterwards, Hela walked in front while trying hard to find some topics to talk to Sophia. Sophia carefully avoided passers-by, followed behind her, and whispered to Hela. When the two of them walked out of the city gate like this, the two eyes that were watching them also withdrew from their bodies. On the Mage Tower in the northeastern area of the Black Domain, Roland and a spellcaster in black robes each held a cup of high-quality liquid of wisdom, stood on the balcony, and retracted their vision. Roland shook the cup in his hand slightly and said in a casual tone. Is that child your apprentice? A child with silver blood can appear in the Tower of Truth at this time. Is she Sophia, the so-called sin-blooded princess? Roland said the last four words in a slightly sarcastic tone. The spellcaster on the side nodded slightly and sighed. Don't worry, she is a good child just like her mother. Those are just rumors. It's not like I can't even see this. I'm just curious as to how this baseless rumor spread throughout the Tower of Truth. There are even fools who actually believe it. Is this the Tower of Truth? Roland emphasized the tone of truth. The spellcaster shook his head and said in a cryptic tone. Your Excellency, be careful what you say. As he spoke, he pointed upward. There is no doubt that this rumor is the result of being induced by the higher-ups. The bloody and cruel Rose War has only brought chaos and destruction. No one, whether at the bottom or the upper levels, has benefited. Therefore, people need a target for venting. And Silver Tower also wanted to take the opportunity to step on the former queen. After all, the former queen was a genius introduced by the Silver family to try to strengthen control of the Tower of Truth. Although under the promotion of some schools of thought, the former queen had been ruined and even removed from the Shirogane family, this was not enough. They set their sights on the queen's descendant, Sophia, and they wanted everyone in the Silver family to know that as the Silver Emperor, it was best not to try to reach into the Tower of Truth. Otherwise, the fate of the former queen and her heirs will be their future, and their so-called family will not protect them, but will only throw out their own people as victims without any bottom line. Roland naturally knew this. He calmly took a sip of the liquid of wisdom, and then the two of them skipped the topic in tacit agreement. While communicating, Roland also silently recalled Sophia's plot. In the plot of her previous life, this so-called prince of sinful blood would actively embrace darkness in the future and transform into a guilty princess who would seek revenge on the entire Silver Empire at all costs. If I remember correctly, the first one to suffer was the Soul School, which was controlled by her with terrifying enchantment spells and became her main base for revenge. Moreover, knowing how to lie dormant, she has been immersed in development for more than 10 years. Based on the Soul School, she has been madly invading the ocean at all costs. A large number of gnolls were controlled by her, even the famous hurricane gnolls were taken under her command. In the end, she was consumed by hatred and drove out millions of gnolls to launch a full-scale invasion of the Silver Empire, directly fighting the Tower of Truth and the coalition of princes on two fronts, killing people in a bloody battle, and forcibly killing a large number of noman's lands. Especially after she became famous, a large number of gnolls from the other side crossed the ocean in groups and took the initiative to join her, so that Sophia, who had sufficient troops, not only blocked the attack of the Tower of Truth, but also killed the coalition of princes. Therefore, in her previous life, her plot chain was quite famous. Moreover, in that event, Sophia's faction was one of the few factions that could ignore all restrictions and directly exchange high-level spells. Although there were only necromancy spells, Roland chose to support Sophia without hesitation. Unfortunately, no matter how hard the players try, they can't fight against the planner's big hand that takes a selfie as a family photo. Even if the players kill a lot in the event battlefield and let Sophia's faction take advantage, they still can't fight against the plot killing. A plot CG directly determined the ending. The Silver Emperor forced her mother to come over, using her mother as bait to force Sophia to enter the encirclement alone, and then, in a cutscene, Sophia and her mother fell in a pool of blood together. Thinking of the first high-level spell book he exchanged from Sophia, Roland's heart moved slightly. Should I help her? Chapter 110. Should we help her? Hella walked in front along the road. She followed the commission map and walked towards the commission target while secretly observing Sophia behind her. After learning about Sophia's affairs and situation through the forum, Hella, who had been massacred by cultists, had her parents and relatives wiped out, and had abandoned herself, still had some sympathy for Sophia, who was also in trouble. Compared with the isolated and helpless Sophia, Hella was still relatively lucky. At least, she still had Roland. When she was most desperate and collapsed, Roland reached out to her and pulled her out of the abyss. And what about Sophia? She has faced malice from everyone from all sides since she was born. In the capital, her mother, who was expelled and imprisoned, probably couldn't protect her. Who knows how much malice the people of the Empire would have towards her under the guidance of the top leaders. Originally, Hella thought that Sophia came to the Tower of Truth and had a 6-ring spellcaster as a backer, so she should not be discriminated against. However, looking at Sophia's timid appearance under the black robe, Hella didn't need to guess that her life in the Soul School these years was probably not very good. Really, the people in the Tower of Truth are not as good as they say. Bullying a little girl and venting anger on her is not a big deal. If you are unhappy with the Rose War, you can vent your anger on those who started the war. A bunch of bullies who only fear the strong and bully the weak. What Hella saw and heard in the Tower of Truth has shattered all her beautiful fantasies about the Tower of Truth. The Tower of Truth is not a holy place for spellcasters, nor is it a free and open ideal place. At least, in Hella's opinion, it is not. Of course, this is also because Hella has been following Roland. Born as a tribesman in the north, she is like a blank sheet of paper and is easily influenced by Roland. As a young man who has received a complete education, has a set of values, and is well-rounded in morals, intelligence, physical fitness, aesthetics, and labor, Roland's daily behavior is constantly influencing Hella, causing Hella's values to shift towards Roland's. It is precisely because of this that Hella now dislikes the Tower of Truth. From the perspective of Roland and Hella, the Tower of Truth is not a good place. The so-called parliamentary republic system, in their view, is just a republic in name only, but actually an oligarchic rule. The Parliament of Truth has not changed for hundreds of years, and several major schools firmly control the Parliament of Truth. Even if some new high-level spellcasters were born in the past few hundred years, they should have been absorbed into the Parliament of Truth, but they would be tacitly suppressed by several major schools and have no decision-making power at all. In addition, in the Tower of Truth, only the middle and high-level spellcasters can be truly called human beings, and only they are qualified to vote and enjoy various privileges according to their level. As for the low-level mages and civilians at the bottom, they are just a group of cheap tools and consumables kept in captivity. Although the spellcasters of the schools at the bottom are better and protected by the schools, they will not suddenly disappear and be captured as experimental materials. However, in the eyes of the top leaders, their status is similar to that of low-level wild mages. For Hella, who was influenced by Roland, the Tower of Truth is completely unworthy of so much praise from the outside world. Although Hella, who still retains the traditional concept of the jungle in the north, rationally believes that the situation in the Tower of Truth is normal, and the lands ruled by the nobles outside are even more rubbish. However, emotionally, she still hates it a little, even though she is a 4th-ring spellcaster and has already benefited from this order. Hella has accepted the feudal ideas of this world and the new ideas represented by Roland. Under the joint influence of these two ideas, the contradictory Hella is now created. This world is so ruthless and cruel. Compared with the civilians struggling on the line between life and death, the slaves who lost their freedom, and the children who couldn't even survive their childhood, Sophia is already very lucky. At least she is still alive, and she can learn magic and have the power to resist. There are so many unfair things in this world. Sophia's things are really nothing in this world. Moreover, Hella can help her for a while, but can she help her for a lifetime? Hella lowered her head and kept thinking about it. She was in a dilemma and still didn't make up her mind. Forget it, wait until the commission is completed and go back to ask Roland. Hella shook her head and forced herself to put aside the messy thoughts in her head. She couldn't think of an answer. Since she couldn't think of it, she would start. Anyway, Roland is here, so these difficult problems should be left to Roland. Behind her, Sophia, who is very good at observing words and expressions because of her past experience, also saw Hella's situation. After seeing that Hella was troubled by something, Sophia was also very tactful and didn't disturb Hella. Otherwise, when Hella suddenly fell into thought, Sophia would not have quietly shut up and not continued to speak, so as not to disturb Hella. Although Hella was now planning to leave the problem to Roland, Hella, who had come to her senses, also found that because she had just fallen into thought, the two had not communicated for a long time, resulting in a subtle awkwardness between the two. Oh no, if Roland was here, he would definitely not make the atmosphere so awkward. Hella pretended to be calm, took out the commission map, looked down, and said as if nothing had happened. It should be another half an hour's journey, do you want to take a break? Behind Hella, Sophia blinked and responded in a low voice. No, no need, I'm not tired yet. Well. Hella looked at the commissioned map and didn't know how to continue. After hesitating for a while, Hella casually raised a new topic. Speaking of which, you must be learning magic control spells. Yes. What a coincidence, I also know a thing or two about magic control. Although Hella racked her brains to find a topic to talk to Sophia, Sophia really didn't know how to chat. Often, Hella would quickly end the conversation before she could talk for a few words as soon as Hella found a topic. Because Roland also taught Hella about the use of positive and negative energy spells, and most of the magic control spells require positive and negative energy, therefore, Hella does know some magic control spells. Therefore, although Sophia doesn't seem to like chatting very much, Hella, as a 4th level spellcaster and also knows some magic control spells, can still slightly perceive Sophia's true emotions. Although it was completely an awkward chat, Sophia seemed to like it and was very happy, so Hella bit the bullet and continued the awkward chat. In this way, the two of them continued to move towards their destination while chatting awkwardly. The first time I put it on the shelves, I set a small goal. If I can get 100 first orders, I will win. Wasn't the post on the release the day before it was released? I see other people doing it this way, so learn from them. Chapter 111. On the Grey Hill, Hella and Sophia were casting spells around casually. Countless natural undead are rushing in from all directions, running towards the hills one after another. However, as natural undead born from abnormal environments, although these natural undead are amazing in quantity, their quality is very poor. Most of them are ordinary natural undead, and they will die instantly after being wiped by a spell. Of course, the astonishing number still gave birth to some relatively powerful natural undead. Therefore, the group of undead that rushed up were also mixed with many 1st and 2nd level natural undead. For ordinary 3rd level spellcasters, a group of undead of this size still poses a considerable threat. But, for Hella and Sophia, there is no threat. A series of 1st or 2nd level undead and enchantment spells were unleashed by the two of them. Afterwards, the undead that surged up were harvested one after another like weeds. Among the few that can withstand the harvest, the 2nd level undead also stand out. Then, he was locked and killed by Hella and Sophia. Under the continuous casting of spells by the two people, the undead groups surrounding them were completely unable to get close to them. Even if there are occasionally 1 or 2 undead that slip through the net and get lucky, the Threaring undead released by Hella from the space bracelet and the virtual grey crow above her head will deal with them. Under the firepower of the two casters, the natural undead that were born due to the abnormal environment in this area did not last even half an hour. After the soul fire of the last natural undead was extinguished by Sophia's 2nd level magic control spell, the preliminary cleanup work in this area was completed. This level of spell casting strength is not difficult for Hella, who is already a 4th level spell caster, but it is not so easy for Sophia. She put down the staff in her hand and her face turned red. Hella glanced at her without leaving any trace. Although Sophia seemed to have consumed a lot of magic power, after half an hour of inspiring spell casting, the thick negative energy in Sophia's body also dropped a lot. It seems like you are letting out the accumulated negative emotions? Hella nodded slightly, just know how to vent, otherwise negative emotions will accumulate too much, which will be bad for your health. She calmly closed the grimoire in her hand, took out 2 bottles of alchemy potions purchased from the Black Domain Alchemy store from the space bracelet, opened one bottle herself, and also took out the other bottle in her hand. Passed it to Sophia. Sophia blinked, looked at the alchemy potion handed to her by Hella, pointed to herself with her right finger hesitantly, and said hesitantly, "Give it to me." Hella nodded while drinking the alchemy potion. She waved the alchemy potion in her right hand towards Sophia, signaling her to take it quickly. After receiving a positive reply, Sophia stretched out her hands and carefully took the alchemy potion from Hella's hand. She held the alchemy potion in both hands, and after glancing at Hella furtively from the corner of her eye, she quietly checked the label on the potion bottle. After confirming that there was a certification mark from the Black Domain, Sophia opened the alchemy potion and drank it in small sips. After taking the alchemical potion, Sophia's condition improved significantly. After seeing Sophia drink the alchemy potion, Hella also endured the smell of the potion, gritted her teeth, and drank all the alchemy potion in her hand in one breath. Although the quality of the alchemy potions here is not bad, the taste is a bit, well, unique. If it weren't for the fact that the alchemy potions Hella made were all Sanwu products, and at the same time, she felt that a cautious and vigilant person like Sophia would be unlikely to accept the Sanwu products Hella made before she established trust. Otherwise, she doesn't want to drink these unique alchemical potions. Although she felt a little disgusted, Hella still managed her expression well without revealing any loopholes. Hella stood there, mobilizing the magic power in her body to quickly clean up the unique taste left in her mouth. Then, she smiled and walked slowly to Sophia's side. She said in a casual tone while naturally taking back the empty bottle that Sophia had finished drinking. I remember Sophia said that she has done similar commissions before, right? What should we do next? Sophia blinked and whispered. Well, if you have someone to teach you about the commission, it's probably just a matter of calming down and sorting out the chaotic elemental environment. The specific repairs will be done by the Soul School personally sending people to do it. Of course Hella has read the commission, and she basically knows what to do, but, Sophia, is there a possibility that Hella just wants to use this as an excuse to chat more with you? After Sophia's answer, Hella reluctantly ended the conversation between the two. Hella had no choice but to take out the entrusted map, flip it to the back, and pretend to look at it for a few times. Then, Hella and Sophia began to sort out the nearby elemental environment. There wasn't much to say about sorting out the elemental environment. The two divided the area into two halves and spread out to deal with it. Element anomalies such as some inexplicable gathering of elemental vortices, flow deviations, elemental conflicts, etc. are all things they have to deal with. Although it is not troublesome to deal with, the abnormal points are scattered all over the area. Therefore, it took the two of them more than an hour to complete the combing work in this area. Although during the cleaning process, there will occasionally be unexpected surprises, such as one or two naturally undead. But overall, it was safe. After finishing the work of combing this area, Hella and Sophia reunited at the agreed place. Let's rest here for one night today. Hella glanced at the watch on her right wrist, confirmed the time, and then she whispered to Sophia. Because the Soul School is not like other schools, the transformed environment changes and differs according to the flow of time. They have almost no changes throughout the day, and it is a pitch-black environment. Therefore, mechanical watches that can confirm time are widely used here. After hearing Hella's proposal, Sophia nodded slightly and agreed with Hella's idea. Then, the two found a flat ground to camp and rest. The light of the campfire illuminated the surrounding environment. Hella sat on a stone, holding a spell book written by Roland in her hand, and flipped through it quietly. Opposite Hella, Sophia sat quietly on a stone, staring at the burning campfire in front of her. In the quiet environment, Hella did not focus all her attention on the spell book in her hand, but secretly observed Sophia with her peripheral vision. Chapter 112. After observing for a while, Hella took the initiative to speak. By the way, Sophia, are you majoring in enchantment? Hearing Hella's words, Sophia, who was staring at the bonfire in a daze, also came back to her senses. She raised her head and looked at Hella, blinked her eyes, and responded. Yes. Although it was a relatively offensive behavior to inquire about the spell knowledge of a strange spellcaster, Sophia didn't think there was anything wrong with it. After all, the two were teammates who were entrusted, and it was normal to understand the general situation, not to inquire about the specific situation. Therefore, Sophia responded to Hella's question naturally. During the battle just now, you seemed to be using enchantment spells driven by negative energy. Didn't you learn positive energy spells? Although it didn't conform to the unspoken rules of interpersonal communication, Hella still boldly asked the question. Hearing Hella's words, Sophia looked at her and met Hella's sincere gaze. After hesitating for a while, Sophia nodded in response. It's not good to only learn negative energy spells. Hella smiled and continued. Let me guess, the reason you came to do the commission is to vent the negative emotions accumulated in your heart due to long-term use of negative energy. Sophia did not answer, but just lowered her head silently. As the offspring of the former queen, she didn't know about this kind of thing, but she had no choice. She had no teacher and no resources, so she was not qualified to pick and choose. She would just learn whatever she could get. If it weren't for her mother's teacher who often violated the ban and secretly funded her, she would probably have a hard time even staying alive, let alone becoming a threaring spellcaster. As Sophia's mood fell, the negative energy in her body also spread out. Hella closed the spell book in her hand and handed it to Sophia. Just when they were separated to sort out the elemental environment, she took the opportunity to communicate with Roland. Roland supported her idea and told her that she didn't need to ask him about such things in the future, and she could decide for herself. In Hella's hand was a textbook that Roland had specially compiled to stabilize the positive and negative energy in Hella's body. Although Hella's problem was necromancy and Sophia's problem was enchantment, both were caused by too much negative energy accumulation, and the principles of handling and solving them were similar. Of course, what Hella sent was not the original manuscript, but a copy she had urgently copied. Sophia noticed Hella's action, raised her head, looked at the smiling Hella in front of her, and the spell book she handed over. This records some knowledge about positive and negative energy. It is a little trick I used to balance positive and negative energy when I was at the bottom level. Although it is not very formal, the effect is not bad. I'll give it to you. You can take it for reference. After that, Hella stuffed the book into Sophia's arms and said instructively. You can look through it in the next few days. If you don't understand anything, you can ask me. By the way, what is the number of your wisdom book? You can add it. After the commission is over, if you still don't understand anything, you can ask me. Sophia held the spell book that Hella stuffed into her, and bit her lips subconsciously when she heard what Hella said. She was a little slow, and said word by word. Why? Hella blinked. Why do you care about me so much? Sophia lowered her head, hiding her face in the shadows, and her tone was a little trembling. Well. Hella smiled, took the initiative to approach Sophia, and said. I just don't want to see a talented spellcaster go astray. Anyway, I have been promoted to the 4th ring, and this book is of no use to me. Take it. Sophia lowered her head and responded in a muffled voice. I understand. After a moment of silence, she glanced at Hella and added in a low voice. Thank you. Then, Sophia took out a piece of white paper, wrote her wisdom book number on it, and handed it to Hella. Finally, she put the book on her legs, lowered her head, carefully opened the spell book, and began to read. Seeing Sophia getting into the state, Hella also picked up the stone she was sitting on, placed it near Sophia, and sat beside her. Then, Hella took out some tools from the space bracelet and prepared dinner. Although 3 meals a day are not necessary for spellcasters, under Roland's influence, Hella will still make something to eat when conditions permit. However, because Sophia is still there, Hella can't take too many things. Although space props are not particularly rare, most spaces are not very large. Like Hella's space bracelet with a huge space, the value is not low. Although Hella thinks Sophia is not a bad person, she must be on guard against others and be vigilant. Therefore, Hella did not take out all the various tableware in the bracelet, but only took some simple tools to prepare some simple broth to drink. Time passed little by little. As the smell of meat filled the surroundings, Sophia, who had been focusing on the book, also moved her nose, raised her head slightly, looked at the place where the smell was emitted, and saw the broth that Hella was stewing. Hella added some seasonings and scooped some soup on her bowl with a large spoon. She took a sip with a large spoon in one hand and a bowl in the other hand. It's okay, the conditions are limited, so let it be. Hella put the bowl on the ground, and at the same time, she also noticed Sophia's gaze. She met Sophia's gaze and smiled. Hella took out a new bowl from the space bracelet and poured a large bowl of broth. Then, Hella handed it to Sophia and said. Want some? Yes, thank you. Sophia took the broth and whispered thanks. Hella waved casually, indicating that you're welcome. Then, she poured herself a bowl and sat back on the stone. How about it? It should be of some use to you. Hella leaned over to Sophia and said with a smile. Yes, it's very helpful, thank you. Sophia took the hot broth, nodded to Hella, and said gratefully. After all, it was written by Roland. Although it may not meet the publishing standards of the Tower of Truth, it is definitely easy to understand and practical. Moreover, there are no valuable spells on it. They are basically teaching how to absorb positive energy, neutralize excess negative energy, and a few useless positive energy spells. As long as the caster has some basic knowledge, most of the content can be understood. Hela smiled and said, I'm glad it can help you, but it seems that it has been so long. Is there anything you don't understand? Tell me. Yes. Sophia nodded, and without being polite, she opened a page of the spell book and asked. Here. Under normal circumstances, I write 4,000 a day, but when to update depends on when I finish coding. If it is only 2,000, I will explain it. The first order is close to 250, which is great. Chapter 113. Handling environmental anomalies is just a very common school commission after all. It is basically not difficult except that it takes a long time. Therefore, Hela and Sophia did not encounter any troubles. They completed the commission in just a few days. As the elemental environment of the last area was sorted out, Hela and Sophia reunited. After a simple rest, the two prepared to return to the Black Domain. Hela and Sophia chatted and laughed as they returned along the road. Under Hela's active friendship, Sophia was still wary at first, but under Hela's offensive, her thick heart wall was still pierced by Hela's pickaxe, touching her lonely heart. After piercing Sophia's heart wall, the relationship between Hela and Sophia quickly improved. After all, Hela had also had a tragic experience similar to Sophia, and to a certain extent, she could understand Sophia's vigilance. Therefore, just as Roland once tolerated her anxiety and patiently guided herself, Hela also tolerated Sophia's vigilance and patiently guided her. Hela had been caught in the rain, and Roland had held an umbrella for her. Now, she wanted to hold an umbrella for Sophia. While the two were chatting and talking about various topics, Hela suddenly looked straight ahead. She raised her eyebrows slightly, and the spiritual power of the fourth ring allowed her to find the approaching crowd earlier than Sophia beside her. Sensing the crowd attacking from afar, Hela frowned slightly. Why do I feel like they seem to be running here? Are they here for her, Sophia? What's wrong? Sophia on the side naturally noticed Hela's abnormality and took the initiative to ask. Hela came back to her senses, smiled slightly, and said. Nothing, there is a wave of passers-by ahead. Hearing Hela's words, Sophia, who had a relatively relaxed expression, changed her face instantly, and quickly took out the black robe from the space ring and quickly put it on, covering her whole body to hide her identity. Although Sophia's stress reaction was a bit big, Hela didn't say anything. After all, the only way to heal the trauma was to find a way to slowly. She had only known Sophia for a short time, and it was good enough that Sophia let down her guard in front of her. Moreover, Hela could sense the malice emanating from the passers-by in front of her through perception. Maybe these passers-by really came for Sophia. If so, why? Who would be so bored to come to block Sophia, and how did her news and location get exposed? The power that can get the commission information from the Spellcaster Association must be not simple. Hela narrowed her eyes slightly and used her mental power to build a spell model in her body in advance. To ensure that if a conflict breaks out, she can act quickly. As the two sides continued to move forward and the distance shortened, a small group of 8 people appeared in front of Hela and Sophia on the road. Although they wore various robes and the spell-casting props in their hands were completely different. It seemed that they were a small group that came from all directions and temporarily gathered together to act. But, it was too deliberate. Hela had learned about the Soul School on the forum. To put it bluntly, this place is mostly filled with dark elements and necromancers. Therefore, most of the shops here sell dark element equipment, props, and extraordinary materials. Given the conditions of the Soul School, the mainstream robes and staffs that can be used by low-level spellcasters are basically of the same style. It is not impossible to gather 8 spellcasters with no overlap in their clothes at once, but the probability is too low, almost impossible. Moreover, the 8 spellcasters on the opposite side also looked at Hela and Sophia. Their vision almost did not stay on Hela, but directly cast on Sophia in black robes. This is not in line with common sense. As a 4th ring spellcaster, shouldn't they pay attention to Hela first? Therefore, Hela was more certain of her guess. She put her right hand on her back, and the magic book appeared silently on her right hand. Sophia, who was standing aside, trembled slightly after being watched by passers-by. Hela held her right hand with her empty left hand, and she whispered. Relax, I'm here. Sophia lowered her head, looked at the floor, and did not speak, and was pulled forward by Hela. Since both sides could see each other and the distance was not too far, they met in less than 2 minutes. The 8 spellcasters did not even pretend, and directly blocked Hela and Sophia. Hela took a step forward, protected Sophia behind her, glanced at them coldly, and said, "Get out of here." At the same time, Hela's aura burst out, and the pressure of the 4 rings rushed towards them. Although Roland taught Hela to be friendly and harmonious in dealing with people, fighting and killing is the last resort. But, for guys like this who are just looking for trouble, Hela doesn't need to give them any good face. Under Hela's pressure, the faces of the 8 spellcasters changed slightly, and they were forced to retreat several steps. However, they did not retreat. One of the spellcasters came out and saluted respectfully to Hela, pointing at Sophia behind Roland and said, "Dear sir, we are here to find her. She is the one with sinful blood." Hela said coldly with a blank expression, not caring about the nonsense they said. "Get lost." Hela's bad attitude naturally made them retreat a little. After all, Hela is a 4th ring spellcaster. It's impossible for the 8 of them to really fight against Hela, right? A few dollars, why risk their lives? However, the spellcaster who came out first to speak was a bit caught in a dilemma. He couldn't just get out of the way as if nothing had happened, right? The remaining 7 people would definitely put the blame on him. When he returns to the Black Domain, he will definitely not have a good time. Therefore, he gritted his teeth, took a step forward and spoke under Hela's pressure. "Sir, she is Sophia, the daughter of that person. The blood of a murderer flows in her body. She doesn't deserve to live here. This is the consensus of the entire Black Domain. You just came to the Black Domain, right? Why do you want to protect her? Are you going to fight against the entire Black Domain?" As his voice fell, Sophia behind Hela became even more depressed, and the negative energy that had just been neutralized for several days increased again. At the same time, Sophia's body trembled slightly. Hela grabbed her hand and said coldly to the 8 spellcasters around her, "You talk too much nonsense. Are you worthy of representing the entire Black Domain?" As soon as Hela finished speaking, several spells burst out quickly. The spell models prepared in advance in the body and the spells recorded in the magic book burst out at the same time. More than a dozen foraying spells instantly suppressed all 8 spellcasters. Chapter 114. As Hela erupted, the 8 casters were easily suppressed by Hela, and all of them fainted to the ground. If Hela hadn't held back and weakened the magic output, let alone fainting, they would have been dead by now. After all, this is the territory of the Soul School, and it is always not good to kill people directly and openly. Moreover, these people may have been sent here, and if they were killed directly, they might be used as excuses. Hela glanced at the 8 spellcasters who fell on the ground. She cast a few more spells to deepen their coma and ensure that they would not wake up suddenly. Then she took out a few spells from the space bracelet. The undead ordered them to pick up all the fainted spellcasters and take them away. Then, Hela put away the grimoire and looked at Sophia behind her. Then, she stretched out her right hand and gently took off Sophia's black robe and hat. Sophia lowered her head, biting her lower lip, and a pale look appeared in Hela's eyes. "Don't be afraid, it's okay." Seeing that Sophia didn't answer, Hela said nothing more and said with a smile, "Let's go." Hela pulled Sophia and prepared to continue walking in the direction of the Black Territory. Since Hela did not pull her directly, under Sophia's resistance, Hela did not pull her. She turned her head and looked at Sophia behind her, a little confused. Sophia's body trembled slightly, her teeth bit her lower lip open, and a trace of blood flowed out. Her right hand moved stiffly, and she broke away from Hela's left hand. "What's wrong?" Hela blinked, looking at Sophia's growing negative energy, and asked with concern. Sophia took a deep breath and mustered up her courage. She raised her head, met Hela's concerned gaze, and pretended to be calm. "You should have heard what they just said." Hela nodded slightly, tilted her head, and continued. "Any questions? Do you know my identity? I should be quite famous. If you ask around, you should be able to know my situation, such as, guilty blood." Sophia whispered, her voice getting smaller and smaller. "I know all this." Hela interrupted Sophia's words. She looked at Hela gently, stretched out her right hand to smooth the scattered hair around her cheek, and said softly. "So? What's there to care about some random rumors, original sin of blood and so on? I don't believe such idiotic remarks. In my opinion, Sophia, you are better than many spellcasters. Moreover, your mother is just a political victim. Hela added in her heart. But everyone thinks so. Aren't you afraid? Sophia lowered her head and twisted her hands uneasily as she whispered. There's nothing to be afraid of. They're just a bunch of stupid or bad guys. What kind of threat can they pose? If they were as righteous as they say, they wouldn't be here anymore. The vast land of the Silver Empire is where they shine. There are so many unfair things, why don't they take care of them? Hela smiled and said casually. If you can believe those bullshit rumors, you are either hopelessly stupid and have no ability to distinguish right from wrong. Either he is bad and paid to disgust Sophia. The former might be okay as a knight, but as a spellcaster, he might not even be able to advance to the second level. As for the latter, Hela didn't think there would be a fourth level spellcaster willing to fight her for a little reward. They just bully the weak and fear the strong. Moreover, Hela also has a background, and Roland is still here. Therefore, Hela is confident and not afraid. Sophia raised her head and looked at Hela, her eyes were slightly red, and she said in a trembling tone. Why? Why are you so nice to me? Hela blinked, scratched her head hesitantly, and said. Because we are friends, and friends should help each other, right? Is it just me who thinks so unilaterally? Hearing Hela's words, Sophia's eyes flashed with tears. She stretched out her hands, held Hela's right hand, lowered her head and said. Are we friends? If you don't mind, yes. Sophia took a few steps forward and hugged Hela, soft sobs ringing in her ears. This scene feels a bit familiar. Hela patted Sophia's back gently, feeling a little familiar inexplicably. A familiar sentence quickly blurted out from Hela's mouth. If you feel uncomfortable, just cry out and don't suppress yourself. Hearing Hela's words, Sophia couldn't suppress herself at all, hugged Hela tightly and cried. Hela also had no experience in comforting people, so she had to use magic to observe Sophia's condition, and use positive energy spells to gently soothe her emotions, while also allowing her to vent all the accumulated negative emotions through crying. It wasn't until Sophia vented her inner frustration and Hela's shoulders were soaked with tears that Sophia recovered. She took a few steps back and let go of Hela sheepishly. Standing there, Sophia, who had regained her composure after venting, felt extremely embarrassed. She had only known Hela for a few days, so how could she do these actions without any shame? Sneaking a furtive glance at Hela's wet shoulders, Sophia wanted to find a crack to get in. Hela did not mention Sophia's ugly appearance just now, but changed the subject as if nothing had happened. She took Sophia's hand and said with a smile as if nothing happened. Let's go. Seeing that Hela had no intention of pursuing the matter, Sophia nodded quickly and followed Hela. The journey back to the Black Territory was much smoother. It didn't take a few days for Hela and Sophia to see the black spots of the Black Domain from a distance. It's finally almost here. Hela looked into the distance, and while speaking, she also turned to look at Sophia. Do you want it when you get back? Looking at Sophia who had put on her black robe again, Hela's words were stuck in her mouth. Hela shook her head helplessly and stretched out her hands to Sophia. She took off Sophia's black robe forcefully and put it into her space bracelet. After losing her black robe, Sophia was also a little uneasy. She looked at Hela with pitiful eyes. Hela held Sophia's wrist and pulled her directly towards the Black Realm. Okay, why do you wear a black robe every day? How can so many people care about you? Everyone hates you and so on, so don't make yourself so unpopular. No, don't be like this. Sophia was very resistant to Hela, but as a partial third-level spellcaster, she couldn't resist Hela at all. Her magic power is limited by Hela, and ordinary people like a fish can't fight against Hela who has the physical fitness of a Threaring knight. Therefore, even though Sophia resisted very much, she was still forcibly dragged away by Hela. Hela, no. As she got closer and closer to the Black Territory, Sophia became more and more anxious. While resisting Hela vigorously, she continued to express her dissatisfaction. However, it was of no use. Hela ignored her resistance and just kept pulling her. After Sophia saw some spellcasters out of the city in front of her, she became even more anxious when she was about to meet someone. Her eyes were reddish and her words were filled with tears. Let me go, please. No, don't let Sophia hide under the black robe today. I won't let her go. Gideon's uniform order seems to be able to write more and more. So is it possible for me to average 500 and have perfect attendance at the starting point in the future? Dreaming of becoming a 500 average writer. Chapter 115. Although Sophia was full of resistance, under Hela's tough attitude, she could only lower her head helplessly in the end, trying to avoid the sight of others. Anyway, Sophia is used to being scolded, so it doesn't matter if she is scolded again, as long as Hela is still willing to be friends with her. Just when she closed her eyes and was preparing to be scolded, most of the people coming out of the black area didn't even look at the two of them, and just passed by them like ordinary passers-by. Of course, some people looked at them curiously, but most of them were just curious about the casters being carried by the undead behind them, or they were passing by Hela. Out of respect for the foraying casters, they walked a gift or something. Although Sophia was also seen by many people, even if they recognized her identity, most of them showed no special behavior and left directly after just one glance. Only one or two people flashed a hint of disgust and quickened their pace to leave. Listening to the footsteps getting louder and then getting smaller again, the nervous Sophia opened her eyes slightly and carefully observed the passers-by around her. Look, not so many spellcasters will care about your rumors. They have no enmity against you. Who would be willing to enmity with a threaring spellcaster? Hela stood in front of Sophia and comforted softly. Be bold, it'll be okay. Sophia nodded, no longer resisting Hela so much. Let's go back and hand over the commission. When the time comes, if anyone dares to jump out on the road, I will give him a punch. Hela waved her fist and said with a smile. Seeing Hela's fist pumping, Sophia nodded and responded with a smile. Then, the two of them walked towards the black area one after the other. Sophia was naturally a little timid, and Hela didn't force her to walk directly in front, letting her follow behind him cautiously. The situation along the way was similar to what Hela said. The spellcasters coming and going in the black area did not show any obvious malice towards Sophia, at least, until they entered the city. When Hela asked the undead to throw all the spellcasters they were carrying at the city gate, several spellcasters also hurriedly ran out of the black realm. They glanced at the city gate, and then they looked clearly at Sophia, who was waiting for Hela at the city gate, and quickly surrounded her. When she saw some familiar people surrounding them, Sophia immediately tightened her face. She put on a disguise and looked at them coldly. No. Just when the leader started to speak, Hela appeared behind him and kicked him away. You're in the way. After kicking him away, Hela calmly walked to Sophia's side, casually glanced at the spellcasters trying to surround her, took Sophia's hand and prepared to leave. How dare you kick me? The caster who was kicked away by Hela got up from the ground in a state of embarrassment. The vision coming from all directions made him a little angry. He pointed at Hela and cursed loudly. Why are you still watching? Hit me. The other spellcasters in the circle exchanged several looks with each other, and after quickly reaching a consensus, they looked at Hela. I'm sorry. A third-level spellcaster said something to Hela while preparing to cast a spell, while the other casters started directly. 7 or 8 second-level spells were quickly formed and attacked Hela. Although with the distance between Hela and them, she could completely rely on the physical fitness of the threaring knight to knock them all unconscious before they finished casting the spell. However, Hela needs an excuse to interfere. Therefore, she did not do this, but calmly built an elemental shield for herself. Bang! As the spell hit Hela's elemental shield, the magic wave of the spell spread quickly. Although you are not casting spells in the Black Territory city, casting spells at the city gate is similar to casting spells inside the city, and you can feel everything you can. Therefore, after the magic wave spread, the casters on duty in several mage towers in Black Domain City immediately looked towards the city gate. The spellcasters on duty frowned after seeing the somewhat embarrassed spellcaster who had just climbed up from the ground at the city gate. Some showed expressions of disgust, and some also looked disdainful, but their final choices were basically the same, ignoring them. Act as if nothing happened. After all, the school's prohibition prohibits casting spells in public places within the city. If you go to the city gate, it depends on the mood of the person on duty. Their behavior can be said to be illegal, or it can be said not to be illegal. In short, for the sake of the forces behind them, the casters on duty chose to make flexible decisions. Just when they were about to turn their attention away, a figure suddenly rushed out of the spell. Then, under the watchful eyes of the spellcasters on duty, the girl punched and kicked all the nearby spellcasters, knocking them down and knocking them unconscious. Interesting. Be bold. Looking at the girl's movements, the caster on duty made a different decision. The caster on duty, who was determined not to interfere, withdrew his gaze and recorded the situation in accordance with the regulations without making any intervention. In addition to the casters who insist on ignoring, there are naturally casters who want to interfere. How can a barbarian dare to be so arrogant? Undead Patrol, dispatch. As the order was issued, the soul fires wandering in the Black Territory city received the order, gathered into teams, and flew towards the city gate. At this time, passers-by at the city gate looked at Hela with some surprise as she knocked the caster to the ground with one punch and one kick. Just now, they thought Hela was going to be in big trouble, but they didn't expect the reversal to happen so quickly. Moreover, the aura Hela exuded at this time, she seemed to be a fourth ring caster? After realizing this, passers-by looked at the only guy who had not been knocked out by Hela with gloating eyes. Of course, some people also looked at Sophia behind Hela with envy. This guy is really lucky. Her mother saved her life in the hands of the Silver family, and her mother's teacher gave her shelter and brought her from the capital. Now, there is another fourth ring caster to help her out. Why don't I have this treatment? Just looking at the benefits Sophia got, the wild magician on the side was jealous. Hela patted a little dust on her body, looked at the caster in front of her, showed a kind expression, and walked over step by step. When Hela approached, he was a little panicked, but his emotions were relatively stable. Looking at the others who were knocked unconscious, he raised his hands to show that he had no hostility and tried to explain. "Sir, I come from..." Chapter 116. Before he could reveal the power behind him and force Hela to give in, Hela rushed in front of him and punched him in the face. After knocking the last person unconscious, Hela clapped her hands, turned around, waved to the surprised Sophia, and said, "What are you doing standing around? Let's go." Sophia glanced at the spellcasters knocked unconscious by Hela and the expressions of passers-by around them, and followed Hela thoughtfully. When Hela and Sophia entered the city, Hela also saw a large amount of soul fire gathering not far away. They stagnated in place, as if they suddenly received some new order. They all dispersed again and returned to the original route. If Hela was just a erring knight, the Anjali caster who wanted to interfere would definitely give Hela some trouble. However, if Hela was a foraying caster, he would naturally treat it as nothing happened. Hela looked beyond them and looked at the Mage Tower farther away. She nodded slightly in the direction of the Mage Tower. "What are you looking at?" Sophia looked along Hela's line of sight and could only see a little bit of soul fire's back as she left, so she asked curiously. "Hey? It's nothing, just saying hello to people." Hela smiled and explained while walking in the direction of the Spellcasters Association. As the two of them headed towards the Spellcasters Association, Roland also withdrew his gaze from the Mage Tower that Hela had just been looking at. "The students you teach are really sensitive," the spellcaster on the side said with sigh. "When I was still in the fourth ring, I didn't have as good a sense of perception as she did. It's her own talent." Roland looked at the spellcaster beside him and replied humbly. The spellcaster smiled. Although he didn't believe Roland's words at all, he did not continue to dwell on this topic, but brought the topic to Sophia. "That one next to her is Sophia, right? The daughter of Lord Hysa's student, she's already so old." As he spoke, he looked around, and after using his senses to confirm that no one was nearby, he warned Roland. "Although as a member of the Soul School, it is not appropriate to tell you some things, but I advise you that it is better to keep your students away from her and keep a distance from her." "Oh." Seeing Roland's indifferent expression, he recalled the problems that Roland had helped him solve in the past few days, and gritted his teeth and decided to reveal some information to Roland. He approached Roland and whispered, "You should have been in contact with His Excellency Hisi. Even His Excellency Hisi can only guarantee her life safety. Even if he provides some assistance, it can only be given secretly. With your wisdom, don't you see that is there a problem?" After saying that, he felt that since everything had been leaked, there was no point in hiding those things, so he continued. "I'm not afraid of your ridicule. In fact, most spellcasters of the Soul School are quite sympathetic to Sophia. After all, her mother was once a member of our school. However, this is the decision of the Silver Empire and the Council of Truth. We cannot disobey it. If we can put her taking over and allowing her to grow up smoothly is the result of the efforts of her mother and the school." Roland looked at him and said casually. "This is your decision. What does it have to do with me? I'm not from Sinner, and I haven't joined the Tower of Truth. This is not an express rule. I don't think I need to abide by it. Besides, why should the things of the older generation spread to the next generation? I think she is just an ordinary child. Is it necessary? Hearing Roland's answer, he also sighed. It was obvious that he also looked down on these decisions of the higher-ups. However, he, an ordinary fifth-ring spellcaster, could not do much. The most he could do was to collect money from those in the school. Sophia's low-level casters wear small shoes to reduce the frequency of Sophia being harassed. Like some outside wild mages who were paid to do things, it was hard for him to be too obvious. He could only let the students who sent him find excuses and beat them up. That was all he could do. The only two high-level spellcasters in the Soul School who can do anything, one is not interested in worldly affairs and stays in his laboratory for many years without knowing what is going on. Although the other is not that geeky, he can't even see him in person. If you have never met Sophia, how can you go against the ruling class of the Silver Empire and the Parliament of Truth because of Sophia? As for Roland, although he is suspected to be a high-level spellcaster, the Council of Truth probably will not simply think that Roland is a high-level spellcaster. Thinking of this, he reminded him. If the Truth Council knows about it, they might send someone here. Roland said calmly without changing his expression. I support all the choices of my students. I don't care about the fights between my peers. However, if someone wants to bully the younger ones, let them come to me directly. I will always be with you. Roland's plain words were full of confidence. He has already defeated the Lich King, yet he is still afraid of ordinary high-level spellcasters? As long as several high-level spellcasters didn't join forces to attack Roland, Roland would not be afraid. Moreover, even for the Parliament of Truth, it is not that simple to mobilize high-level spellcasters to cause trouble for Roland. High-level spellcasters are not big soldiers. They are basically senior figures from various schools of thought and members of the Parliament of Truth. As the ruling class, it would be good if they don't order others around. How could others order them around? Therefore, even if the Truth Council really sends someone, it is most likely to be a mid-level spellcaster. For Roland now, mid-level spellcasters are a gift no matter how many they come. Moreover, will the Truth Council really provoke Roland because of Sophia's little problem? Roland has no doubt that if a high-level spellcaster stands behind Sophia, not to mention Sophia, even her mother may be free. Although Roland is not a high-level spellcaster now, he is not interested in supporting Sophia. After all, the Tower of Truth is just a temporary stopover, and he does not plan to live here. However, Roland cannot stay to support Sophia, but it is enough to train a high-level spellcaster to support her. For example, her mother's teacher, her current protector, the six-ring spellcaster, Hess. Hess has been in the sixth ring for many years. All he needs to break through the seventh ring and become a high-level spellcaster is an opportunity. And Roland can give him this opportunity and help him to smoothly advance and complete the second sublimation. Just think of it as a reward for Sophia's high-level spell book in the previous life. Chapter 117. Although what happened at the Gate of Black Domain quickly spread throughout the entire Black Domain, for most residents of Black Domain, it was just a topic for conversation. For most people, since the Soul School did not issue any official notice, there was nothing to pay attention to. Instead of spending time to inquire about these things, they might as well spend more time thinking about how to improve themselves. Therefore, with few people paying attention and the deliberate suppression of the Soul School, the incident between Hela and Sophia at the gate of the city was quickly calmed down, and basically not many people knew what happened. Of course, this could not be hidden from the Truth Parliament. After all, the Truth Parliament is the only ruling body of the Tower of Truth, and the various schools are just groups selected to form local ruling structures according to the election system of local cities. Strictly speaking, they can all be regarded as subordinate institutions of the Truth Parliament. Although the Truth Parliament has handed over a large amount of autonomy to various schools according to regulations, it will still put its own people in every city. Therefore, whether it was the arrival of Roland and Hela, or Hela's contact with Sophia, or the small actions of the Soul School, the Truth Council knew everything through the people they had planted. It was just that the Truth Council did not dare to act rashly because of the news Roland had passed on through the Soul School's spellcaster. Even if Roland guessed that the Truth Council had disagreements on how to treat Roland, no idiot would come to cause trouble before they reached a consensus. It was precisely because of this that in recent days, the Black Domain acted as if nothing had happened. And taking advantage of this peaceful period, Hela also began to play her own role. She took Sophia to run around the Black Domain and participated in various activities, from various debates, practical competitions for splicing undead, application practices of negative energy, to some small project innovation practices, whether it was privately held or official events, Hella took Sophia to participate in them without any criticism. Hella is talented and hardworking, and Roland took care of all her needs while teaching her attentively, so that she could concentrate on studying. Therefore, although Hella has only been with Roland for a few years, her knowledge is no worse than that of the school mages of the Soul School. Although Sophia does not have as good conditions as Hella, she knows more than ordinary spellcasters because of the knowledge left to her by her mother and Hess secretly. Therefore, if the two of them compete together, they will basically be fifth at worst, even if they are not the first. For any school, wisdom and ability are what they respect the most. Therefore, the two who showed their wisdom quickly became famous in the Black Domain. Although Sophia's performance was not as good as Hella's, and she was the so-called Sin Blood Princess, her wisdom and ability were still recognized and respected by most spellcasters in the Black Domain, and there was no surprise because of her identity. Facts have proved that the spellcasters of the Tower of Truth really don't care about Sophia's identity. The reason why they ignored Sophia before, or looked at Sophia with strange eyes, was just because they felt that Sophia was a stranger to them and they were too lazy to pay attention to her, or because Sophia wore a black robe every day, which was a bit prominent in the crowd. After Sophia proved herself, she occasionally received greetings and respect from some Black Domain spellcasters when she was dragged out by Hella. In addition, the Truth Council has been chattering about Roland's problem these days and has not been able to reach a consensus. In addition, Hella often drags Sophia around. Therefore, no one will be blind to make trouble. Under the long-term influence of this environment, Sophia's mood has also improved at a speed visible to the naked eye. As positive and negative energy are emotional energy, the emotions of the caster himself will naturally affect the positive and negative energy. Generally speaking, when the caster is in a happy mood, he will learn positive energy spells faster, and when he is in a low mood, he will learn negative energy spells faster. The influence of this factor is also one of the reasons why Sophia has been so successful in learning the enchantment spell driven by negative energy in the past. Now, after Sophia's mood improved, her efficiency in learning positive energy spells increased all of a sudden. Sophia learned positive energy spells by herself, and with the positive energy knowledge that Hella revealed to her from time to time, she found excuses to give her alchemy potions and so on. In less than 3 months, with the help of Hella, Sophia completed the balance of positive and negative energy in her body. In a dimly lit room, Sophia opened her eyes. In her eyes, 2 strands of positive and negative energy intertwined and transformed with each other, forming a delicate balance. In less than a few seconds, the positive and negative energy in her eyes quickly dissipated and returned to their original normal appearance. Then, she stood up and moved her body. With the balance of positive and negative energy in her body, she felt a lot more relaxed all over her body. Of course, this is just a balance of energy in the body, which does not mean that Sophia's level of positive energy spells has caught up with negative energy spells. She is still best at the enchantment spell driven by negative energy. After calming the turbulent magic power in her body, Sophia walked out of the room, closed the door, and turned off the lights. Sophia has been accustomed to a poor life. In order to save money, she even turns on the dimmest and lowest setting of the lights. There are no expensive magic furniture in the room, and it is basically ordinary furniture. If the lights were not built into the house, Sophia might not even install them. She sat on the sofa in the living room, took the Book of Wisdom on the table beside her, and opened it. This was secretly given to her by Heiss. Except for the account, it is no different from an ordinary Book of Wisdom. However, in order to avoid causing trouble for Heiss, Sophia would only use it at home and never take it out of the house. She first searched to see if there was a private post from Hella. After confirming that there was none, she sent a private post to Hella herself, explaining her situation in the post. After finishing all this, Sophia lay on the sofa, holding the Book of Wisdom, and opened the local forum of the Soul School. When she opened the local forum, a post immediately attracted Sophia's attention. Duel. The mysterious 4th ring spellcaster Hella versus the veteran 4th ring spellcaster Gryat. How did Hella fight with other 4th ring spellcasters? After seeing the title, Sophia immediately straightened up and opened the post. After quickly browsing the content of the post, her face changed drastically. She didn't even have time to close the Book of Wisdom. She threw it directly on the sofa, changed her clothes, and hurriedly ran out of the room and ran towards the duel field in the Black Domain. Chapter 118. In the duel arena of the Black Domain, the the largest battle platform in the duel arena is extremely lively. In the audience, a large number of spellcasters gathered here. In addition to the largest number of first and second level spellcasters, there were also a large number of third level spellcasters, and even a few fourth level spellcasters. And to attract so many spellcasters to watch, the people on the stage are naturally not ordinary people. On the left side of the duel field, wearing a robe sewn by Roland, Hela held the magic book in her right hand, gathered all her breath, and looked peaceful like an ordinary person. Opposite her, on the right side of the duel, stood a spellcaster wearing a robe of truth. He looked at Hela with some contempt. His standing posture was a bit lazy, and the golden magic book was on his body. Floating beside him, powerful magic power surged out of his body and turned into continuous pressure and pounced on Hela. Regarding this battle, all the spectators present were very curious about who would win. Is it the mysterious fourth ring spellcaster who suddenly appeared recently and whose background is unknown, Hela, or is it the recognized top fourth ring spellcaster from the City of Truth who has been on the fourth ring for more than 10 years, Griot? Although most of the spellcasters present are more emotionally inclined to Hela, after all, Hela, like them, studies dark elements and necromancy. However, rationally, they still believe that Griot has a higher winning rate. After all, he comes from the City of Truth and has been in the fourth ring for many years. Although the increase of age does not mean the increase of strength. However, Hela looks like she is only a teenager, which is too young. Can she really know as much knowledge and spells as Griot? Therefore, they still felt that Griot should win. In the midst of everyone's attention, Griot glanced at Hela casually and said lightly, "Young little guy, recognize your own identity and status. There are some things that you cannot interfere with. Listen to the advice of your senior, surrender, and then stay away from her. This is the best choice for you." Hela glanced at him and was too lazy to answer, thinking silently. So arrogant? Doesn't it mean you don't know anything? While Hela was thinking, Griot also frowned slightly, a little dissatisfied. "Humph, rude guy, it seems you are a teacher." Before he could finish his words, the referee quickly interrupted him and shouted, "Start!" Tisk. Griot glared at the referee dissatisfied, and looked at Hela with a calm and confident expression. Such a spellcaster who destroys places. When he turned to look at Hela, a fourth ring spell had already rushed in front of him. Varied. Bang. Fourth level spell negative energy blast. After receiving the fourth level spell on his face, Griot, who was unprepared, was also blown into a bit of a mess. As a price, the light on his robe was dimmed a lot. Before he could react, several third ring spells took advantage of the opportunity and blasted at him one after another. After resisting several more attacks, Griot also escaped from Hela's attack in embarrassment and ran out of the dust. After quickly setting up an elemental shield, he looked at the cracked robe with some distress. Then, he looked at Hela and said with gritted teeth, "Good, you pissed me off." As Hela, who had been tortured countless times by Roland, she did not have the bad habit of chatting during battles. Therefore, she ignored Griot's situation and calmly continued casting spells. 4th level spell Necromantic Strengthening. 4th level spell Soul Strengthening. 3rd ring spell Flesh and Blood Activation. 3rd level spell Strengthening Bones. Under Hela's continuous spell casting, the aura of the 3rd ring undead she took out from the space bracelet continued to surge, and she temporarily possessed the physical fitness of a 4th ring undead. "You've been strengthened, come on." After quickly casting spells to complete all enhancements, Hela directly issued an attack order to the Threaring undead. After receiving the order, the Threaring undead did not hesitate. When he pulled out the bone sword, his figure disappeared directly from the place. Bang! In the blink of an eye, the undead rushed directly in front of Griot, waving the bone sword and attacking his elemental shield continuously. Griot glanced at the undead with disgust and threw out a pyroblast technique. "Go away, disgusting corpse!" As the blooming sparks exploded, his voice spread around. For non-necromancer spellcasters, undead are naturally not very popular. However, most spellcasters still know that the necromancer's undead are built piece by them and belong to the necromancer's hard work. Therefore, even if they don't like the undead, most spellcasters won't say anything openly. Moreover, necromancers also know this and rarely release their undead when outside. However, in one's own territory, one cannot always. Especially in the Soul School, 9 out of 10 spellcasters know how to rub the undead. Even if you really hate it, you can't say it directly. After all, the average necromancer basically has some feelings for the undead that he carves out piece by piece. If he directly insults the undead in public, it will easily arouse the dissatisfaction of a lot of necromancers. Therefore, after Griot's words spread, the spellcasters in the audience were in an uproar. What's the meaning? A spellcaster with the 8th and 4th rings is so shameful to you. How dare you be so arrogant in our territory? Trademark, even when Littorio was in power, he hated the undead very much, but he never said such words when he was inspecting the school of necromancer. Who do you think you are? A 4th ring spellcaster, do you really think you are a big shot? Griot's words directly made him full of hatred here, and every spellcaster in the audience looked at him with a different look. Even the spellcasters who thought he was from the City of Truth and admired him before were also dissatisfied with him. Several 4th ring spellcasters had dark faces, took out the Book of Wisdom from their arms, operated on it for a few times, and stared at Griot and the other spellcasters who came with him without hiding their dissatisfaction. Being stared at by so many spellcasters with hostile and malicious eyes, the spellcasters who followed him also sweated profusely when they looked at the photo stones that recorded everything in the hands of some of the spellcasters beside them. Although they were born in the City of Truth, they looked down on remote places like the Black Domain. However, as talents sent by the Truth Council, they naturally knew that although the Black Domain was a remote place, it did not mean that they could act tyrannically. If they provoked the local soul school, even if they were right, they would not necessarily get any benefits. Moreover, the current situation was that they might not only provoke the soul school, but the entire group of necromancers. Haha, send. Chapter 119. After speaking out his heart, the dissatisfied gazes from all directions also made Griot realize the problem. He was too arrogant. Although he knew that he had messed up, Griot had no choice but to continue fighting. It was okay to offend, anyway, he was not interested in dark elements and necromancy, and he would just not come to the soul school in the future. The first thing he thought of was to escape. As for apologizing to them, that was completely out of his consideration. No matter what, he came from the City of Truth, how could he bow to the country people in the Black Domain? Even if he was wrong, so what? Griot didn't think that the people of the Soul School dared to do anything to him, he was sent by the Truth Council. Therefore, after just a brief moment of thinking, he put his energy back on Hela. After the Threaring undead was knocked away, a dark element light ball also flew from the direction of Hela and entered the body of the Threaring undead. After the ball of light entered his body, the Threaring undead also stopped in midair. Then, the skin on his back was torn by the bones, and dozens of crystal white bones stretched out to both sides, forming a pair of bone wings. Then, with a wave of the bone wings, the Threaring undead rushed towards Griot again at a faster speed. Griot thought that he had offended the necromancer, and he was too lazy to manage his expression, and directly showed obvious disgust. Fireball. Around him, hot fireballs formed in midair, and one by one they bombarded the Threaring undead in midair and Hela in front of him. Relying on his flexible mobility and Griot's attention on Hela, the Threaring undead dodged one fireball after another, constantly closing the distance between him and him. As for Hela, she had no intention of dodging, and directly confronted him, rubbing out one shadow ball after another to bombard the fireball. As the two sides continued to bombard each other, the sound of countless elemental explosions resounded throughout the duel arena. Bang! Griot looked at the Threaring undead that was constantly slashing at the elemental shield, and saw it emitting a strong negative energy aura, and he became more and more annoyed. He stretched out his right hand, and the magic book kept turning under his right hand. Then, he waved his right hand and shouted sharply. Fourth ring spell summon, Lava Knight. The moment he cast the spell, the Threaring undead bone wings that sensed the elemental fluctuations waved and quickly moved away from Griot. When the undead left, the ground where he had just been quickly turned into a fiery red, and boiling molten lava quickly rose from the fiery red ground. Countless molten lava rose, forming a molten lava layer more than 3 meters high, and then a human-shaped knight riding a warhorse walked out of the molten lava. This knight, including the warhorse, except for the fiery red armor, seemed to be made of flowing molten lava from top to bottom. Of course, appearance is not important. What is most eye-catching is that the knight summoned by Griot and the warhorse under his crotch all exude the aura of the fourth ring. They are all foraying extraordinary people. As soon as he walked out of the lava, the knight looked at Hela. Under Griot's command, the knight controlled the warhorse under his crotch, like a ferocious beast, and charged straight at Hela with great momentum. Looking at the charging lava knight, Hela's face also flashed a trace of surprise. After catching the surprise flashing on Hela's face, Griat became more confident and directly asked the lava knight to speed up and crush the unknown clown who dared to touch Sophia into slag. However, what he didn't notice was that while Hela was surprised, the corners of her mouth also rose slightly uncontrollably. Facing the huge pressure of the lava knight's charge, Hela calmly put on a foraying elemental shield for herself, and then she responded to the lava knight's charge. Her right hand was hidden under the magic book, and she made a gesture to assist in casting a spell. Then, a second-level space spell was thrown out by her. Second-level spell Expel. After witnessing the battle between Roland and the Lich King, and Roland's disappearance in the space turbulence, Hela specifically learned some space spells from Roland. In this way, Hela can also play a role in similar situations in the future. However, space spells are difficult after all, and Hela is not so proficient. She cannot cast spells as casually as dark elements and necromancy spells. She needs to rely on casting gestures to assist in memorizing spell models. But this only makes Hela's casting speed slower. As the power of the second-level space spell passed through the Magma Knight, the Magma Knight suddenly stopped in place, just like an image on a piece of paper being wiped off with wall paint, and quickly disappeared without leaving any trace. So easy? Summoning creatures don't actually do space protection? Isn't he afraid of encountering a space mage? Looking at the disappearing Magma Knight, Hela was stunned for a moment, and the casting gesture on her right hand stopped, putting away the Threaring space spell she had brewed. After the Magma Knight disappeared, Griat, who thought he had won, blinked his eyes, totally not wanting to see what he saw. No, you are a nameless wild mage, you know dark elements and necromancy, so how come you can even cast rare space spells? Even if Griat was slow, he realized that something was wrong. Is Hela really just a wild mage with no background? Space magic is notoriously difficult to learn, and it is basically impossible to learn it by exploring on your own. At least, according to Griat's knowledge, space mages are all brought up by their teachers. It's bad. She contacted Sophia not because she was stupid, but because she had the confidence. However, she dared to play a game with the Council of Truth. Maybe there was a high-level spellcaster standing behind Hela? Thinking of this, Griat was numb. He offended the Soul School, and with an unknown high-level spellcaster, would he really not die here? He couldn't stay in the Black Domain for long, he had to run away quickly. The game between high-level spellcasters was not something that a mid-level spellcaster like him could get involved in. He was not one of those poor spellcasters who threw himself into these dangerous games for resources and promotions, and worked for high-level spellcasters with his life. Damn it, those guys must have received the news in advance and wanted to trick me. I was wondering why no one was willing to come. Griat came to this conclusion 1 second after the Magma Knight disappeared. Then, in the 3rd second after the Magma Knight disappeared, when Hela and the 3 Rings Undead were about to continue attacking him, he raised his hands and chose to surrender. You have cracked my trump card, so I admit defeat. Chapter 120. No one knows what Griat thought about in the short time after the Lava Knight was expelled. People who don't know what kind of person Griat is are naturally very surprised to hear that Griat surrendered. Especially Hela on the field. As a Facetofis opponent, Hela knows Griat's condition very well. Although Griat is a little embarrassed, it is mostly just a superficial embarrassment. He has not suffered much damage. Although the magic power in his body has been consumed a lot, it is still sufficient. He can still continue to fight. Why did he suddenly surrender? Hela was a little surprised, but since he admitted defeat, Hela couldn't force him to continue fighting, right? This is not outside, so many people are watching. Although Hela doesn't care much about face, as she followed Roland here, she has to maintain Roland's face. She doesn't want her rudeness to be extended to Roland. Therefore, Hela stopped the spell in her hand and called the Threaring Undead at the same time. After the referee announced that Hela won, the spellcasters in the audience also stood up and applauded. Although they didn't know what was going on, they won anyway. Even the foraying spellcasters present stood up and applauded. Although they didn't necessarily have any good feelings or impressions of Hela before, they were very upset by Griat's map artillery against the undead. Therefore, they were still very happy to express their admiration for Hela who defeated Griat. Amid the warm applause from the audience, the spellcasters who followed Griat were particularly embarrassed. They looked out of place sitting in the same place. It's not good to stand up and applaud with the audience, which is a slap in Griot's face, but if they stay sitting, the sights from all directions make them a little restless. However, their torture did not last long. After Griot politely bowed to Hela and said goodbye, they left the duel field in disgrace at Griot's behest. After returning the gift, Hela just watched Griot and his party leave silently. Although she was still a little confused, Hela was too lazy to think about it. After saluting to the audience around her to express her gratitude, she quickly left the stage. In the corner of the audience, Sophia looked at the brilliant Hela on the stage, with a bright light of longing in her eyes. After the duel ended in a daze, the spellcasters who came to watch the battle also quickly left the duel field, and each returned to their own affairs. At the same time, the news that Hela defeated Griot was quickly spread to the Black Domain and even the entire Soul School through the Book of Wisdom. Although there were some distortions in the details, Sophia followed the crowd out of the audience and stood outside the door of the duel field. She looked at the surrounding environment hesitantly. Because she was too worried about the duel between Hela and Griot, she went out without any preparation. Therefore, this was the first time she walked out of the streets of the Black Domain without wearing a black robe and without Hela. Sophia had a subtle feeling when she saw the soul fire floating in front of her. Maybe it was because the positive and negative energy in her body had reached a balance, or maybe it was because with the help of Hela, she found that the spellcasters in the Black Domain did not have the malice she imagined towards her, or maybe it was because she did not need to wear a black robe and lower her head to hurry on the road, nor did she keep her eyes on Hela. She raised her head and looked at the dark sky of the Black Domain, which had hardly changed at all. Suddenly, she felt that this sky and this city were still pretty good. Where should she go next? Sophia walked on the street with some ease, thinking silently while walking. However, after thinking about it, Sophia could not think of any good place to go. Although she had lived in this city for 7 or 8 years, Sophia's previous activities were basically her residence, the Spellcaster Association, the grocery store, and the Wizard Tower. She might not know this city as well as Hela, at least Hela remembered the map of the Black Domain. After thinking about it, Sophia thought it would be better to go back to her residence. Maybe Hela had received her private post and replied to her message? While she was thinking, a hand suddenly patted her shoulder from behind. Hey! Sophia turned back subconsciously. A finger poked her face. Hela met Sophia's eyes, smiled and said. Sophia actually came out by herself without wearing a black robe. Not bad, there is progress. After saying that, Hela retracted her fingers, rubbed her head to express praise and encouragement, and then walked a few steps to the side and walked to Sophia's side. Sophia did not resist Hela. Although Hela might be about the same age as her, Sophia saw a familiar figure in her, her mother. In her memory of living with her mother when she was a child, her mother was about the same height as Hela, just as gentle, and often taught her hand in hand. Moreover, no matter what happened, she would stand in front of her to protect herself. So, although she felt a little uncomfortable, Sophia still often regarded Hela as her own mother. But, mother, are you okay in Ginza? Thinking of her mother whom she had not seen for many years, Sophia's mood suddenly became depressed. I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. In the Black Domain, when Mom is not around, you have to eat well, sleep well, and live well. Mom still has a little money there. Just be an ordinary person and live a stable life. If you encounter any trouble, go and tell the uncle over there, he will help you. In the last memory of her mother, the vague mother hugged her petite and kept whispering. As she spoke, the mother, who was a 6-ring enchantment spellcaster, still couldn't control her emotions. A few tears fell from her eyes on Sophia's face. Sophia, my child. In the memory, the vague mother's face flowed with bright red liquid, and she stretched out her right hand to block her vision. Forget me, just treat me as if I'm dead. At the end of the memory, Sophia could only hear the last sentence of the conversation. Teacher, Sophia, I'll trouble you next. Hey, why bother? After a moment of silence, the male voice continued. I will take good care of her, according to her wishes. Sophia lowered her head, feeling depressed. Hela looked at her depressed, stretched out her hand to pull her up, decisively changed the subject, and said with a smile. By the way, I found a very interesting place a few days ago. I have wanted to go there for a long time. Now I have time. Do you want to go together?